All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'd like to welcome you all out to our city council meeting for November the 13th. And we'll begin with a prayer from Hussein Samha. And then we'll have the pledge by Councilman Cousins.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. In the name of Allah, the merciful, all praises and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of the mankind, the most gracious, the most merciful. You, Allah, we worship, and you alone, Allah, we ask for help. Guide us to the straight path. Allah has said in the Holy Book, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَ اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولَهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Allah has said, if you have to work, you work, and you do your best in your work. Soon Allah will observe your work, and His messenger, and the believers, and the mankind. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ إِذَا عَمِلَ أَحَدُكُمْ عَمَلًا أَنْ يُتْقَنَهُ. So the Prophet has said, Allah will be pleased with those who do their work in a best manner they can, and they put quality into their work. It's like being looked up as another way to glory Allah. And also the Prophet has said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ. Actions are done by intention, thus each individual will be rewarded by according what they intended. May Allah bless the Cedar City Council and give him the courage and the strength to lead the community and lead us on the path best for all citizens. May Allah guide them on the path that brings prosperity to the community and allow us to grow successfully together. Ameen.
Thank you.
Y'all please rise and follow me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'd like to move into our agenda order approval.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I would ask that we remove item 11 from the action agenda and request that we move item number 21, the consider resolution for the adoption of Cedar City Water Conservation Plan, to just above number 10 in the agenda due to some scheduling conflicts. With that, I would make a motion to approve with those changes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, under our administrative agenda tonight, mayor and council business first. Council have anything they'd like to share with us?
Well, I have one thing. It seems like we just go from one event to another. We're going to be taking down all of the harvest decorations this Friday in preparation for the Christmas season. And as part of that, the Historic Downtown Economic Committee is doing what we hope will become maybe sort of an annual tradition. We're doing a lighting ceremony with all the new Christmas lights that the city has. That's a question mark.
They're scheduled to get here Friday.
Okay. And they will be put up. And then I know the Iron County Visitor Center and the Beverly Center for the Arts have done quite a bit of lighting on their facilities as well. And we're going to be doing holiday happenings. The lighting ceremony is scheduled for November the 25th from 6 o'clock to 7, with the lighting coming on at 7. It'll be right out here on the north side of the City Hall, between the Caldwell Realty Building and City Hall. It's going to be kind of fun. They've got some high school choirs coming. We're going to have some fire pits to do s'mores, and there's going to be singing. We're going to have a Christmas tree decorating contest. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the food wars on television, but we're doing Christmas tree decorating wars, and people will have like 15 minutes to decorate a Christmas tree. We're looking for teams to get together and do it. So it should be a lot of fun. It's just going to be a way to kick off the lighting. And so that's just to make all of the council and the community aware. That'll be on November 25th at 6 o'clock. Did I miss anything, Danny? Okay. That's all I have right now.
Along with that, I had a citizen come to me and they wanted the gazebo on the Main Street Park decorated. They want to remain anonymous, but they have donated $600 to purchase decorations to light up the gazebo. So that's going to be an addition to our decorations. And so every time we drive by and see that, we'll know that's one of our citizens that contributed to us.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from council? I'd like to just congratulate Councilman Scott Phillips on receiving the Citizen of the Year Award from the Iron County Board of Realtors today. I was excited to be there and see him accept that award.
Never sold a house in my life, but I bought several.
Yeah. So, but for all your work in the community, they
Thank you. Thank you very much.
acknowledged you. Okay, we'll move on to staff comments with the Employee of the Month. Brad Abrams, Danny, you're going to do that. Okay.
It's been a long day. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm thrilled tonight to be able to be the one to present the Employee of the Month Award for the EAC for the city. I got to nominate my entire or half of my economic development staff. He was chosen to be recipient of this tonight. And I'm just going to read from this because I don't want to miss anything. And this is short. This is doesn't really cover everything that Brad does. But Brad Abrams has been with the Office of Economic Development since 2016. He is an excellent candidate for Employee of the Month. Brad does an outstanding job for economic development. He genuinely cares about Cedar City and Iron County, and he is creative and thoughtful in the many ways he communicates the city's message to numerous audiences. Brad oversees the city's website. He is meticulous in his work to keep the site fresh and user-friendly, even within the limits of the Civic Plus platform. He also deals with lesser seen and lesser understood aspects of the website, keeping it compliant with security and accessibility standards that most people aren't aware of. Brad is an excellent representative of the Economic Development Department. He is in charge of responses to frequent requests for information, helping companies that are considering Cedar City and Iron County by providing crucial data and organizing it in simple and attractive documents. He also works closely with the Historic Downtown Economic Committee and the Cedar City Historic Preservation Commission, serving as a recorder for both organizations. He's also helped design web pages for various community interests, including the Animal Adoption Shelter, the library, and others. He also helps the organization of Cedar City events, including the Half Marathon, the Slow Roll program, and others. Brad is a great person to have on our team. He is very well liked and well respected, and I'm grateful to have Brad in my department. I think this is a very deserving award for him today. Just today, he's already been putting out all kinds of fires and doing all other kinds of things as far as lunches and posters, the poster that you see here and everything else. So often when there's an assignment from the city, the go-to person is right here, and he does an outstanding job. So happy to represent, to recognize Brad as Employee of the Month.
Is it required to get that haircut to work with you?
It is. Very
Yeah, no, that'd be nice. I don't think I need to give it back to him.
Okay. I'll take it.
We'll get more, but
That's cool.
Without the mayor here, I managed to get this far without giving my name. I'm Danny Stewart with Economic Development.
Oh, I slipped up, huh? Slipping on.
Run on and catch that. I have one more announcement. For the last several months, I've been working with program that's called the Area Sector Analysis Process. This is something that's being done in all 5 counties in our region under the direction of the 5 County Association of Governments. The Office of Economic Development here and Cedar City and Iron County are working with them. And what this does is helps us update our strategic plan for economic development. It gives us better understanding of our community, of our assets, of the types of things that our residents are interested in happening for the future. This is something that goes very well hand in hand with the Chamber's Vision 2050 program, and the data that we collect here will help with that visioning process. But we met today, our steering committee for this group, and we're at the portion of this program where they're asking for citizen input. In the counties where they've done this, they're thrilled to have a few hundred responses. We'd like to get more than that, because the more responses that we can get, the better that data is, the more accurate the picture is that we're trying to learn from. They've put together, in cooperation with Utah State University, University of Idaho, University of Nevada, and the Western Rural Development Center. This is a regional effort, and they've done quite a few of these surveys, and they've put one together for us through the University of Nevada, where you can log online. Each one of these has a unique password so that we don't have duplication in the survey. But I'm inviting council and any citizens that are interested to participate in this. I have a few copies of cards that have a password if you're interested in getting on that website and participating in that. It probably takes about 15 minutes to get through the whole survey. It's well done. It's from a pretty high level, but this data will be put together with the assets and other things that are going on in the community to help us point our direction in economic development planning for the next several years. But I just wanted to make these available and entertain any questions if you have any.
2 of the council have already taken this.
That's right.
Because
2 of
we
the
were part of
council
the-
members are members of the economic development community by Councilmember Hartley and Isom, and we appreciate them. And
It is truly 15 minutes probably at the most.
yeah, it's pretty simple. So I'll have a few copies with me here. If anybody would like to grab these, I'll make these available. If any of you would like them, I'll make sure that you get them as well.
Danny, can I ask you a question while you're
Sure.
there? And this may be out of your world, but I know that Tyler Melling is also here, and I believe as board chair of chamber, correct? Is the Vision 2050 survey still available? Because I think it's really important that people and citizens fill that out if it's still possible. So can I ask him to just address that for a moment?
Yeah, that certainly is. If you want to talk to that.
It's along the same lines, but it's very important.
It is, and this will coincide with that.
Tyler Melling. Sorry, my voice is gone. So as of Monday, we had a little over 300 responses to that survey. We're leaving it open, hopefully, until we get a little over 1,000.
So could you tell the audience here exactly how to do that? Because a lot of
Yes.
people I know did not get the survey.
So if you can remember the URL, just go to cedarcitychamber.org. It's right there on the homepage. There's a link to the survey. There is, if you can't find that, you can also just type into Google Cedar City Chamber of Commerce. Should pop right up. It's just right there on the homepage.
Yeah, this is again about a 12 to 15 minute survey, and it's part of the Vision 2050. It's very important that we hear from the citizens of Cedar City how they envision this community in 30 years from now.
Yes, I will add, if you are giving thoughtful responses, it may take a little longer than that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move into our business agenda. Oh, wait, is there any other staff comments before we move on? No? Okay. We'll move into our business agenda with the public comment portion. If there's anybody that would like to address the council, you're welcome to come forward and state your name and be as brief as possible. And for anything that isn't an item on the agenda. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on then to the public portion of our agenda with our consent agenda first. to the approval of minutes dated October 16th and 23rd, 2019. Ratify bills dated November 4th, 2019. Approve final plat for the Blackstone PUD Phase 1. Approve a gravel mining lease with Blackburn Family Partnership, and approve vicinity plan for Crescent Hills Phase 3. Approve accepting the petition to annex 40.74 acres located in the vicinity of 1850 North, 3500 West. Approve granting a public utility easement to Rocky Mountain Power across the city's golf course. Approve renewing Staley Rec Management's lease to operate their ice rink on the northeast corner behind the city's aquatic center. And approval of a bid from Broderick and Henderson Construction in the amount of $1,572,539 for the Fleet Facility Maintenance Building Remodel Project.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move into the action part of our agenda. We'll begin with item number 21, which was consider a resolution for the adoption of the Cedar City Water Conservation Plan.
Jonathan Stathis, City Engineering Department. This was discussed last week. The State Division of Water Resources requires the city to update this plan every 5 years. We discussed the plan at last week's meeting. The plan has been reviewed and approved by the Division of Water Resources. And the plan needs to be adopted by resolution. So if there's any other questions.
I did have one question continuing from my question last week. Called Paul Monroe from the Water Conservancy District. And it's the Utah Department of Natural Resources has set a regional goal for us for 19% by the year. Craig, you were on the conversation too. Now I
think it was.
I don't have my note in front of me. By the year 2030, I think we had to achieve that. So I guess my question would be is if this plan is in conformity to start meeting those goals that they had outlined. If one of them's the Division of Water Resources and one of them's the Division of Natural Resources, does it coincide anywhere or is it two totally different assignments? I don't know if you can help me with that, Paul. Paul Monroe said he worked with you on that.
I've had conversations with Paul about it. They are two different entities. They are two different assignments. The frustrating part is they keep setting percentages on decreasing water use, but they never set a benchmark that you subtract those percentages from. So to me, they're kind of aspirational goals to encourage us to better our practices, clog our leaks, encourage people to use water-wise landscaping and better water use practices. It's kind of difficult to hit a percentage goal if you don't know where you're starting from.
Right.
So I think they work together.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call vote, beginning with Councilwoman Hartley.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on back to item number 10. Thank you, Jonathan. Back to item number 10, which is canvass the votes from the November 5th, 2019 election. Is it on?
Okay, so we've got the final numbers for the election. With Don Oswald, 1,767, Tyler Melling, 2,914, Terry Hartley, 2,482, Adam Hahn, 1,769, Brittany Perry, 1,109, Craig Isom, 2,142, and the voter turnout was 40.13%.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the canvas numbers as presented.
Second.
Second. Okay, we need a roll call vote. Councilman Cousins, we'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move now to item number 12, as item number 11 was pulled, was taken care of. Consider vicinity plan for Blackstone PUD. Do we have any? Yeah, I say you weren't.
One before.
Oh,
Brent Drew, Levitt Land and Investment. And I'm just waiting. So it's a little different than that. This is the phase 3 of the Blackstone. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to describe it up there. There it is. Okay. So this is up on by the middle school. It is the most north and east part of the property there along Cove Drive. It is 22 single level family units, most 2-bath, 2-bedroom or 2-bath, 3-bedroom units. And it's a PUD, how we're building them in there. So all inside, everything is private roads, and the landscaping is all taken care of with the homeowners association.
As you know, last week we had quite a discussion about the compaction of the soil and the height of the soil. And thank you for taking at least me around and showing me some of that stuff. I just want assurances again that we're not complete there and there's still work to do. And it will conform with the ordinances of the city where there is a 6-foot required wall between the property on the one side and the other.
Yes. In fact, no, I shouldn't. I wrote down several other words, to show that it still is not complete there.
Okay. What are those choice words you have for us?
Well, I have incomplete, undeveloped, pending, fragmented, partial, in the making, in the rough. Not done, rough hewn, tentative, incomplete, unconcluded, under construction, and unexecuted. And I'll hand that to Renan so you can put that in the meeting minutes. But anyway, I shouldn't be not trying to be sarcastic, but we are still not done on that part. We also had council person, Terry, we took her out there and showed her the property too, and still working on that part, but it will be, brought down from where it is still. I'm trying to think of the other. Oh, and on the trail, I think we showed you a little bit more how we're going to take that trail from where the city goes, make our sidewalks longer, wider throughout that whole section.
And I would just urge you to always look at additional landscaping. I will always put that out there, Mr. Drew.
And then the one thing too that Terry got to see today that you didn't was we actually were able to take her down where the trail goes down through there too.
And you were very good in our discussions at any hand. And I want to make sure for any of the public that might be here that you have assured me that you will continue to work with those neighbors and try and be good neighbors to them and work with them on whatever those issues might arise.
And I also feel comfortable with that. They assured me that they are taking that ground down there and that they are going to be good neighbors, that it will be acceptable on there and be within the ordinances. So please believe him when he says it's still under construction, okay?
Anything else?
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we'll begin with Councilwoman Hartley. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Okay. Actually, I didn't need roll call that, did I? But that's okay. Okay, got so many on here.
Yeah.
That are. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 13, which is to consider an ordinance amending the general land use from municipal uses to central commercial for property located at approximately 1325 Northfield Road.
Dallas Buckner, Go Civil. So this is a parcel at the intersection of Northfield and 1325, right across from the hospital. I know Arlo was here last week and gave the presentation, but any questions on this one?
Is that Dr. Is Delcor's office directly west?
Yep.
Okay.
right across.
I just have one question. I'm still not clear exactly where that one parcel is they want to leave left as R3. And so where is that in relationship?
So it's right next door. So you have
To the east?
To the east, yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
And it's a relatively small parcel. I think it's like an acre, 7.5, something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call beginning with Councilman Cousins.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move into item 14, which is to consider an ordinance amending the zone from R3M to CC for property located at approximately 1325 Northfield Road.
Same property.
Yep. So one's the general land use, one's the zone change.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, roll call. Paul?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, item number 15 is to consider an ordinance amending the general land use from low density residential to medium density residential for the property located at approximately 130 north, 2800 west.
Yep. So this is the Crescent Hill subdivision. So this is the remainder parcel. Developer is Mike Coronado. What we're going for here is on the northerly side, we have we're going from the R21 zone to the R22, where we have the twin home duplexes along the north. And then the topography falls to a low point kind of right in here, and then it starts rising. And then it rises up to pretty steep along this existing side. I spoke with Councilman Cousins earlier today about this. I know there's some concerns from the neighbors. Kind of my take on it is there's engineering standards that the city has as far as roads. And so that's, along with engineering standards and the topography, that's going to dictate what we can and can't do. I think that what's ultimately going to end up happening for this piece in particular is it's going to look similar to the Burgess subdivision to the south, where we're going to end up turning those cul-de-sacs. And then I think we're going to end up with larger lots all along this backside. As far as the slope, it kind of varies along here, but in this corner, just going off Google Earth, I think it's about 37%. And then the engineering standards go from 10%, and then there's 12% for up to 500 feet, and then there's 15% for 100 feet. So what that means is basically when we turn those up and put the cul-de-sacs, it's going to significantly limit what we're going to do, what we're going to be able to do in here. And so for these previous phases where we have north-south facing or north-south oriented roads, we'll probably be able to get one more phase of those, and then we'll have to look at turning them up. And so I would imagine that all of the lots along here are going to be much bigger than the R2. And so the intent is basically to get the lot size R2 that we can, and then where we can't because of the engineering standards and topography, we'll look at bigger lots.
Dallas, will there be open space then behind some of this area that can't be developed, or what?
I don't think there's going to be open space. That was one of the things that's kind of been thrown out as far as green space and that kind of thing. I think from the green space aspect, I don't know that the developer necessarily wants to hold on to it and pay taxes, even if it's at the lower tax rate. I don't know if there's anything that the city is willing to accept open space. I know they're doing it for the PUD on Iron Horse, but I asked Don that question and he said that might be a Paul Bittman question. So
We've done it before. We did it for, it was the Lunt family, I think, that owned all that property to your south.
okay.
All that open space to the south of this development has been donated to Cedar City to keep in a perpetual conservation type easement. Look, there's advantages to us in that we can preserve some open space for the public. There's advantages to the developer that they can get it off their books and they don't have to pay taxes on it.
Yep.
We did with that property to the south of this development request and include some language in the deed to say we can go through there to put in utilities or maybe a trail. So while it's open space, it's not, maybe, I don't know if pristine's the right word. Maybe I can ask Brent if he's got a thesaurus still and I can borrow that a little bit. But, it would be open, but we may put some trails or some utilities through it.
Sure.
So tell me just again, you're requesting the low to medium density is because you want smaller lots. Is that the general reasoning behind this?
Yeah. So the size, the minimum size for an R2 lot is, I think it's 7,000 square feet. I think on average in phase 1 and 2, we've been more at the 8,000, 8,500.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just allows us to get those smaller lots, to help with the house prices and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what we've done for phase 1, 2, and then we just got the vicinity plan for phase 3 approved. And so the idea is basically we can go as far as we can with a similar kind of product that's out there right now. And then from there, we'll have to get creative and start looking at topography and how we make the grades work and all that.
Yeah.
I spoke with Mr. Coronado today about this too, and got his assurance that he had no intention of building up that high. Similar to what Dallas said, they'd have a cul-de-sac. And if you go over by Cody Drive, those cul-de-sacs go up so far and then the house. And nobody really down on that end has done anything with those lots as they go up the hill steep. And I think that's what this would be if they didn't get, the open space like you guys talked about.
Right.
So I feel good about it based on talking to you and Mr. Coronado.
Yeah.
Would this address the concerns that Mr. Platt had about it as well
It
last
would.
week down in that
And
corner?
I talked to Mr. Platt, and he's about it too today. He seems, relieved that would be the case.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call beginning with Councilman Cousins.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Nay.
So you have to wait.
You
Okay.
have to break the time, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll vote aye.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to item 16. Consider an ordinance amending the zone from R1 to R2-1 and R2-1 to R2-2 for the property located at 130 North 28 Entered West. Same piece, Dallas?
Same piece, yep. So that was the general land use that you just voted on. This one is the zone change.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call beginning with Councilwoman Hartley.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, aye.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dallas. Okay, we'll go to item 17. Is to consider an ordinance abandoning a 20-foot wide easement located at approximately 200 east, 1600 north.
So this is the annexation kit. If you'll keep going. There we
Dallas,
go.
state your name again. Just
Oh,
for
Dallas Buckner.
in
Go
between
Civil.
here. Okay, thank you.
All right. So we did a minor lot on this couple council meetings ago, and we just needed to get the PUE vacated. And so that's for vacating the 20-foot PUE and so it's for vacating the PUEs. It was zoned commercial. We changed it to R3. And so the reason that the commercial was on there is because it requires a 20-foot PUE. When we changed it to R3, no improvements have been constructed. And so we've gone to the smaller one on the new minor lot.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call beginning with Councilman Cousins.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 18. Consider an ordinance approving the request to amend the plat of the town center condominiums located at 96 North Main Street.
Dallas Buckner, Go Civil. This is an amended
Isn't this
plat.
great? We put you all together. You could just stay right up there and just go on a roll.
I thank Renan for this all the time, especially when we have so many items.
Yeah.
So this one is what the Spirit Halloween store. What it was, now it's vacant, but I think Arlo probably covered it. Any questions on this one?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call beginning with Councilwoman Hartley.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, we'll
thank you.
move to item number 19. which is consider an ordinance redefining the term family as it pertains to rentals in the R2-2 and the R3-M and SHD zones. Tyler.
So this was a proposition, I guess, that was brought up by staff. As I made clear last week, staff really isn't in favor or against this. This was just multiple citizens coming forward and wanting to have some flexibility in homes that contain more than 4 bedrooms and they have enough parking on off-street parking for the renters. So it just gives some flexibility there that if they want to, they could define a family as 1 per bedroom as long as they meet the parking requirements that currently exist in this zone.
And how do we define a bedroom?
Well, the International Building Code does that for
I mean,
us.
that comes right back to us on all the things we had on the Airbnbs and everything else.
Yeah.
Is, how people change it as long as it's 70 square feet and all that sort of thing. I mentioned last week, I still have heartache over this one. And it's not because I don't think that we have a need to have rentals and things for people to live in. And I know that affordability is always an issue. And I want to thank Mr. Earl for the information he sent us and background he's provided to us. I think it's been very helpful. I just have concerns about what it has the potential to do to continue in the neighborhoods. And I live near the university, so I see it right, left, and center, and I know what it is. I'm not against rentals at all. I was a college student and I rented everywhere I was, but I've seen too many cases where those rental properties are really not good for the neighborhood. And I'm just not sure that 15 or 20 or 30 or however many citizens came forward on this is the reason for it to change our ordinance at this time. So I'm just very concerned about making this change.
Okay, other comments?
Well, that was last week, but it's up to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, we can allow. Keep it brief.
My name is Burl Prestwich. 35 years ago, south of the college on 300, 450, and 500, almost all of the homes were owner occupied. And on our street, we're on 450, there was one house that had a basement apartment. Other than that, all of the homes were owner occupied. That's 35 years ago, which has been a while. The almost every home had children, and there were babies to teenagers, and there were many children on all 3 streets, especially on our street. Slowly, the homes have been purchased for rentals, and I don't know of any home on our street that's been purchased for a family to live in. They've all been rentals. So that's the way it's going, and it's not that people are going to change. They don't want to have children. If there's a family across the street that have a little child, and they're going to get out as soon as they can. So or soon. Not as they can, that's the wrong way to say it, but it's just not a place for children anymore. It's not a family area. And so I have a concern too. I want it to stay for families, but it's not going to. On our street right now, there are 7 that are owner occupied out of all of the homes. Most of the homes are now going. They're not even homes there. I would say today half of the homes in that area are rentals. So you're concerned about it going to rentals. It's going to go anyway. And I'm concerned that they're kept up. And I believe that, for example, Mr. Earl's home, I believe before he purchased it, had 10 students in it. Well, it was easy to keep it up back then because they were making pretty good money out of it. It's difficult when you have 7 or 8 bedrooms and you only have 4 students. Until this year, all of the new construction buildings were two-story on our street and on the other streets as well. Two-story, and they had considerable amount of parking, which created so it wasn't a problem on our street for their parking. And they had the same setbacks, I think you call it backs, same setbacks, as the existing homes, which continued to make it feel like it was more of a neighborhood. As of this summer, they're building a home or an apartment building with reduced setbacks. And if you want to drive by there and just feel the 4 stories there just next to the street, you'll notice it's significantly different feel. It is not a neighborhood anymore. And if you continue to have, the homes only have 4 students in them, pretty much all of them will go to large buildings. Now, if that's what you want, is large buildings going up and down all of the streets there, that's what you're going to get. I don't think that you need to change all of the town R1 and R2 so that it's more than 4 unrelated people. But I do believe in that particular zone, not that I'm going to put any more in because I kind of like it the way I have it, but and I've got a couple of rentals. But I think there are other people who will keep those homes up and supply a place for students to live who do not want to live in large dorms. I think there's a market for that in this community. I did not want to live in a large dorm, and so I didn't when I went to college, and I went several places. And the students who have moved into my places, some of them have lived in the large dorms and don't like it. Plus, I charge $250, and they're going to pay $450 or $500. And I have a couple of rentals that have families in them, and I keep the rent down. They have many kids, 2 kids and 3 kids. I guess not many, but they love being able to be next to the school so that they can come home for lunch and see their kids. So there's some advantages to having older homes near the university, but I believe they need to be kept up.
Indeed.
And I think your problem is going to be they're either going to disappear or they are not going to be kept up. And I don't think you ought to change the idea of families. I think that needs to stay the same. I think you need to have something just for that area. And if that's not possible, I don't know how you're going to do it. But it's not going to be families. It's just not going to be that way. The other thing that I'm concerned about is if you allow, well, let's go back to planning. You've got asking people 30 years what they think the town needs to be and what we need to do. We need to plan ahead for some streets that go through town that have 4 lanes. You have 1, and as I talk to people, they're trying to stay off Main Street for 2 reasons. 1, for everybody that has to be there. And 2, just because it's dangerous and crowded and compacted with cars. You have Main Street. Now, 300 West could at least have turn lanes in it if you took the parking off. And I know that you don't want the parking taken off, and I don't want the parking taken off, and most of the people that live on that street don't want it. I lived on South Main and grew up there, and when they took the parking off, it made it very frustrating for us. We no longer just pull up and park in front of the house. We had a single car driveway, and it was very complicated. And it will be complicated, but that's about the only place you've got. If you reduce the setbacks and allow big buildings to go up that street, you've eliminated your potential to widen that street later on because there's nice big setbacks. I realize that those people don't want to look at their lawn or lose their lawns, but look at 700 East in Salt Lake. They lost their lawns so that they could have a wide street on 700 East. And this town's going to grow. Look at all these new developments you're talking about. And how many people want to get out of California and Phoenix when they run out of water which could happen, where are they going to go? I'm probably taking too long. I think basically that's all I wanted to say. It's not the same kind of neighborhood. It is not a neighborhood anymore. It's a place for students, and you need to go back to the fact that all students do not want to live in a big dorm. And if you want to continue to bring students into Cedar City to go to the college who don't want to live in a big dorm, and I think if you were to survey the students coming, many of them don't want that. I don't know what you'd call it, and I don't know how high you'd go. I don't think you can make it a large number. I don't know if you want to go to 6 or what you'd want to do, or just change the zoning for that particular area of town.
Well, right now it's per bedroom, so it depends on the number of bedrooms in the house. So, thank you.
Well, it isn't per bedroom because you can have 4 students in a house. You could have 2 bedrooms and have 4 students. So it's not per bedroom.
Well, it depends on how you rent it out.
Well, you can have 4 unrelated students.
Mhm.
Okay, so you could have 2
That's how it is
bedrooms.
right now.
Huh?
That's how it is right now.
As it is right now.
Correct.
And you have some huge bedrooms. So there's no reason to not have 2 students in a large bedroom with 2 walk-in closets. And what are you having in your new dorm down there that they're building? Is it going to be 6 per apartment?
I have no idea.
Somebody knows. What is it? On 450 West.
The Founders Hall.
Well, the developer's
no.
right behind you.
How many are in
Yeah,
Founders
Brent
Hall?
may know.
There'll be a total of 92, and they each have their own individual bedroom. So
Okay.
it's,
So how many in an apartment?
well, what do you call an apartment?
Well,
They
one
have
kitchen,
big,
a
large-
kitchen.
It's a little different because they have large kitchens every.
There's a big communal area.
Brent, will you come up to the mic?
There's a big communal area there.
Yeah.
What do they have over? Oh, you've got the Founders Hall as well.
I'll have to make you come up.
I'm not really here for this item.
I know.
It should be Ron that talks about the specifics
you?
on this, but
Who are you?
Say your
Brant
name.
Drew with Levitt Land. This is really different because they have a large living room, separate bedrooms, 1 bathroom to 2 bedrooms. It's really hard to explain how the whole thing is on it because they have a study room that has 6 of them per study room.
Well,
But
apartment
it's-
living has changed dramatically in how dormitories are set up. It's not
Yeah.
kitchen, living room anymore.
It's still essentially 6 then together?
Well, no,
Essentially 6?
I'd like to say yes, but there's 16 per kitchen when you have 3 kitchens. So the answer is, it doesn't fit any of that.
What's Founders?
Founders is 6.
6 per
Right.
kitchen.
Right.
Okay.
So back to the idea, I know if you look at many of the little bit older university housing areas around BYU and Utah State and up at Rick's, there's 6. Many of them are 6 per apartment. 6 might be a reasonable number for you to consider. I don't know. Anyway, I think 4 is not reasonable for that particular area of town. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody got?
Well, I'll just say something. I do own a rental. I'll disclose that I own a rental that could be affected by this. I have a family in there. There's not students, but I think it could be affected. Kid, is Cedarwood Terrace, is that R2 off of 300?
No, I don't think it.
Or is that
I'd have to look.
Or is that R1? I don't know. I'm just disclosing. I have a rental. Is that R2, Tom? I haven't checked, but I don't have students in there, but so it doesn't. But anyway, I happen to agree with Mr. Prestwich. I agree with the information Mr. Earl sent us today. I think if we err, we need to err on the side of providing housing for our students. The college is going to grow fast, and so I'd make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call, beginning with Councilman Cousins.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move into item number 20, which is a public hearing to consider entering a lease with Staley Rec Management for the use of the city property located at approximately 2214 West Royal Hunt Drive.
So I saw Mr. Staley walk by about 5 minutes ago. But I'll just go through some of the changes. So I just want to apologize to the city council. I sent it out another amended version about 5:13.
514 is what it
5:14.
is.
I apologize for being a minute off. So these are based on some recommendations that came from Councilman Isom and Councilwoman Hartley. So I'll just review some of the changes, though, that I've put in place since last meeting. So we're all on the same page. So I added an additional paragraph under the purpose. This simply says that the city is a fee simple owner of the property. We intend through the lease to convey to Staley a leasehold interest in the property, and the lease is limited to that leasehold interest. In Article 3, paragraph 8 and 9, some amendments were made. Paragraph 8, I simply state that the city will retain and be reimbursed for any and all earned interest once these funds go into escrow. And then based on Ms. Hartley's recommendation, under paragraph 9, before the city's donations go towards construction, Staley's would need to provide proof that all of their cash donations that have been pledged and received have been spent previously. We jump forward to Article 9, paragraph 7. This deals with the Staley's duty to maintain property insurance on the glacier. I added some additional language that was requested to make sure that at no time can that insurance amount be less than $5,700,000 to make sure that that property is fully insured. Now, if we jump forward to Article 10, paragraph 18, this is the non-compete language.
One more time, give us that article and page.
10.
It's going to be Article 10,
Okay,
18.
paragraph 18.
thank you.
So in the original non-compete language, I changed the first sentence to state, during the term of this lease and any extension thereof, Staley agrees not to compete with city by running programs simultaneously that the city is offering. And then it goes into the same language as before. Or another option would be what was sent out earlier that basically says that Staley and city are going to agree to meet at the end of each quarter and to use their good faith efforts to make sure their programs aren't competing with each other. And then two more changes. So one other change, in order to qualify for the $67,500, is originally written that the glacier needs to be in operation a minimum of, or it needs to be in operation year round. We changed that to make sure it's a little more clear. It just needs to be open a minimum of 365 days, which I think we accomplish. And then in Article 14, this deals with the financial records and budgets. So there's some additional information that came last week to clarify this a little bit. So in the first sentence, in fact, Dallin, if you want, I made thank you. I felt bad just springing this on you so late, but I highlighted some of the additional language that I added today. So in Article 14, this deals with financial records and budgets. In the first sentence, I added that these financial records that they're required to provide need to be provided to the city when completed, but no later than 120 days after the fiscal year. So that got rid of the May 1st language. We added language stating that these financial records would include a balance sheet, profits and loss statement, and an accompanying compilation report from a CPA firm.
But that had gone out earlier.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I added a paragraph that talks about the audit that Councilman Isom brought up last week. So this language states that at Staley's expense, a full audit will be conducted by a CPA firm at the end of the first full year of operations and every 5 years thereafter. When a full audit is not required, an annual financial statement review with the accompanying review report will be submitted to City. Said financial reports will be submitted to City when completed, but no later than 120 days after fiscal year end. And I believe that was the last addition. So I just want to thank the council members for their help in this and looking at it. And that's where we're at with the various recommendations.
I just have one other small thing I would like to have considered, and it's at the very beginning under the whereas. Sorry, I got to find it. I got to get clear to the top again. I was following all your dutiful instruction, and so I believe it's the second. Let me see. It's the top of page 2. It says, whereas Staley desires to construct and operate and maintain an ice rink on the property and. You with me?
Yep.
Could it say, at least I would like it to say, in Dallas, is operate an ice rink / multi-purpose facility or property, just like you have below. I just want to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves again to strictly an ice rink, because right in the following one, we do state that it would be ice rink / multi-purpose recreational facility. That is all.
It's my understanding that the rink will not be open and available on Sundays. So I'm not sure 365 days being open works. I don't know how we
just defining
how
a
we
year.
reword.
Yeah,
But if all you're defining is a year, then
Yeah.
that's fine.
it is.
I don't know if I don't know if that is that a big deal, Bill? I mean, if you say a restaurant's open all year but they close on Sundays, would that be kind of the similar thing?
I would think.
So.
Is it
Yeah, my intent in writing it wasn't to count being closed on
holidays or something?
July 4th and
Okay.
holidays and Sundays.
So normal closures and everything else are included in that year.
In
We
yeah,
just put
As
a year
defined.
excluding
Okay.
normal closures for O&M and holidays and Sundays.
Okay.
I had a question as well on the Exhibit A where it shows the footprint and that complicated legal description. I don't know who in the world wrote that, but kudos to them.
I know exactly.
Wow. But are we absolutely sure the footprint of the ice rink will fit within that exhibit, just to make sure we're not off a foot or two here or there? I mean, is that a big deal? Are we, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, if it fell outside of that footprint, then we'd want to amend the
Talking about this
lease by
right here.
updating that exhibit. So
Well,
I think we
diagram.
could, we could deal with that then. I had our engineering department go through and give me that legal description and double check it. I think we should be good.
Are we good there, Dallin? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, seeing this as a public hearing, we will need to open the public hearing. If there's anybody from the audience that would like to address this, you're welcome to come up to the mic, state your name, and be as brief as possible.
All right, I guess I'll address it. You're probably sick of hearing from me.
Never.
Who are you?
State your name.
I'm Dallin Staley. So I guess there's still a few concerns on our side. I'll lead with that, but I want to lead with this maybe before any of that, and just say that, you know, we've kind of molded over through the week, and really, I guess, come to the conclusion that as both sides of this issue, I think it would really serve all of us well if we just maybe took one step back from a lot of the details. We've been kind of throwing details at this idea and this contract and that kind of stuff. If we took maybe one step back before we start discussing the details that we like or don't like, and just really consider the end keep the end in mind, I guess, with all of this stuff. Because there is two sides to this thing. There is certain needs that the city has. And we 100% would like to acknowledge those needs. And I hope you guys can get a feeling from us that we are incredibly grateful for the faith that the city has shown thus far, for all the patience that everyone's had throughout all the twists and turns of ideas and different things. And we just want to recognize also that this is new territory for everyone here. So we're kind of, in a way, we're kind of writing the book at this point. We're trying to figure everything out. We know that the city needs to feel protected, feel secure, needs to have that long-term security, needs to have the openness and the clarity to the public with this kind of a relationship, all of those kinds of things. So, so we want you to know that we really do acknowledge the needs of the city, and it is our sincere desire to make sure that the city gets everything that it needs in this contract. We really want the city to feel good and feel confident. At the same time, we would really like to request that the city acknowledge that we also have needs, that we have a need for security, that we have a need for consistency, and a need to be able to feel secure in the obligations and the commitments that we will be committing to with this lease. So as we talk about different things, I just want you to know that our objective here is not to get the absolute best deal for ourselves. It's to get the best deal for both of us, something that we can all stand on. A contract can either be a solid foundation that defines the relationship for a long time, that keeps you on solid footing and makes you successful, or it can be something that could be a ball and chain to one of the parties involved and could ultimately make it less successful or a failure. So I guess I just want you to kind of know the perspective that we're looking at it from, that our overarching end goal is that we have something we can all live with, and that this is a success, that this is a foundation and not a burden. So, yeah. So anyway, with that in mind, there's a few concerns, I guess, and I'll need to just kind of flip through my notes to get to the right pages. Tyler pointed all of the changes out there. I guess one of them was kind of addressed, and I sent Craig a text because I wanted to get his professional opinion as a accountant and a CPA, was about the audit requirements. And I think those changes are actually really good. Just our concern was that every 3 years may be a little excessive and also fairly expensive for us. But our board will have to discuss those changes because we didn't get them in time to discuss them. But I do feel like audits in this kind of a nonprofit are necessary at regular intervals. So,
Alan, do you mind if I share with everyone what I shared with you
in the text?
Yeah, in the text.
Yeah.
And that is that when audits are performed, there is an audit of systems and controls and procedures that help protect assets and the parties that are using those audited financial statements. And as I indicated to Alan, I think we want to know that sooner than later. We want to know that those controls are in place and that they're operating effectively. And that's why I had inserted the requirement that we have that audit right after that first year. We know that things are chugging along just as we expect. And then we can rely on those controls.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and that's something that we've learned in our business too. We've had audits done and we've had them point out things that we should do better. And it's not necessarily a distrust thing. It's a, I guess, a way to actually build trust in a way. I don't know. It's a positive thing, not a negative thing. So yeah. Okay. So I guess kind of the first point of discussion.
So back to
is-
that, what are you suggesting then? How often an
An
audit?
initial audit after the first year,
And then
every 5 years thereafter with reviews in between.
and you're saying you guys are good with that, or?
We'll need to meet with our board to discuss the changes there. It sounds a lot more reasonable to me. So, yeah. So, and yeah, I think that satisfies some needs on the part of the city and the community too, to have that transparency and know that things are being looked at too. So, so this is something that was kind of brought up, I guess, from Terry last week, and that is the last dollar contributions. And I think that's where this addition of proof that all cash donations have been spent for the construction. So
Do you have a reference where that is so we can
Yes,
just look at the actual language?
So it's going to be page 6. That's Article 3, paragraph 9.
Thank you.
yeah. So, yeah, a few of us that have discussed it, and David Westwood, who's our legal counsel, we all felt like that was a very broad statement and quite unclear as to exactly how or when or what we're doing here. But in general, I guess we felt like there's already quite a bit in the contract. So I think what we were getting at with the last dollar thing, Terry, and feel free to correct me if I misunderstood the main objective of what you were asking, but essentially is not giving money to the project if there's not the funds to complete the project. Is that right? That was kind of the overarching thing. So there is already, without this, there's already quite a bit in the contract to ensure that. And some of the big things is, well, I think probably the biggest thing is that we have, I don't know, I can't remember the exact term in the contract, but commence construction, I think it was. And there's requirements for that. Some of the big requirements for that I think really covers your concern is that we have to have all underground utilities in place, which requires all the digging, and all of the contingency in this project is underground. And that's something I talked about with the architect and the contractor too. The vast majority of contingency in this project is underground. All the digging, all the underground has to be in place. So all the utilities, the footings, the foundations, and the flat work already have to be in place to even be considered as having construction commenced. So that's a very good part of the funding and the vast majority of the unknown that will already be completed at that point. We would like to request that, once those things are in place, we will have a very good idea of if the rest of the funding is there when we put the city's funding in with it.
A good idea and cash in hand is two different things. So what we don't want you to do is end up being $2 million short. Donors fall through, like pledges, they fall through, and we don't want to put all of the taxpayer money into that, and then those donations fall through and we have an unfinished building that you can't do anything with. And so then do we put another couple of million in to finish the building? That's where I'm coming from on that. I feel pretty firm on that. I guess I don't see where that would be a problem. If you've got donations pledged and people are ready to step up, why can that money not be expended before the city taxpayer money is?
It's mostly a cash flow issue, that if we have to go out and start borrowing money to even access the city's money, then we have to start paying interest on that money. It complicates the process more, but it also raises the price of the overall thing.
Are you saying the donations aren't coming in until later, or?
No, I think most of the donations will be there. Some of the funding aspect of this is our own contributions to the project, and I mean that's going to probably be borrowed money, And we
That part of it I wouldn't have a problem with as long as we verified you had the funds available, but it's all of the other cash donors that I have a problem with, making sure that that is going to come through before the taxpayer money goes into it. So
Councilman Hartley,
I don't know
I
what the
just
rest
I
of
want to
you.
ask a question just so I understand. So you're saying that, let's say that company XYZ has pledged X number of dollars, but they've asked in a letter that they pledge this, but it will be over 24 months. So you're saying that if the first one came at the beginning of the second year when they commenced construction, but the second payment wouldn't come till a year later, that wouldn't suffice, so they would need to wait another year? I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, that's why I asked him the question, when are the donations? Does he see there's a problem with a long-term donation? Most of these, I think, are pledging and putting the money in. They're not like the Shakespeare building that we've talked about.
Well, and,
So-
and I guess at this point, we don't know exactly how the donations will come in. So it's really hard to even know. What I said before, the footings and all that isn't the only requirements, though, for getting those funds. There's also requirements of providing proof that the funds are coming. So I'm just kind of speaking off the top of my head here, but I do think it would be acceptable, and I get where you're coming from, that there needs to be proof that those donations are there. And if it's, if those donations are committed, but they're not from a credit-worthy source, or a source that is a secure pledger, I guess we'll say, for lack of a better word, then I
guess I would rather have it shored up at the beginning, and if we have to make amendments later according to a donation, a specific donor, how they're funding it, something of that sort, that we could make an amendment to the contract later. But I just think going into it up front, I would feel more comfortable if the donor's money is into the project and we know that the ice rink can be completed before we put taxpayer money in.
Yeah, and as far as in-kind donations, I guess those kind of come into play.
Yeah, that's why it says
here.
cash only.
Okay, so in-kind donations, I'm assuming that in our construction contracts and that kind of stuff, that we will have already had contracts for what those donors are going to charge us. So so
that's specifically just the cash.
Okay, so we can exclude the in-kind donations from that last dollar. We can also exclude cash contributions from Staley Rec, right?
As long as you show that you have the availability.
As long as we have the credit to get there. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Thoughts from anyone else?
Sure. Yeah, you can talk about that.
That was one area I had a concern with. I'm Dave Staley, by the way, too. The one thing that I think we want to avoid is being locked down so tightly on that provision that we have to run our bank account to zero always before we could ever make a request for a draw from the escrow account. That because what me as just the way that I would like to do business as a member of the board would be, we would like to have a cash balance that we could maintain in an account, because one of the other provisions that you guys have asked for in this agreement is that those bills be paid first, and then we ask for reimbursement from the escrow account. I believe that's correct. Is that correct? So if we don't have any cash to pay the bills first, and at some point it's going to hit into a cash flow situation. That's the one thing I want you to understand. If we don't have any cash to work with, let's just say we got $100,000 draw that we needed to pay. We would like to have $100,000 of cash in our account to do that initially. But if that runs us down to zero, for instance, just as an example, then the bank account is at zero. And then we have, let's say, another 25,000 draw that we need to make, then we do have to go borrow money to do that, because another donation may be coming down the road a month or two. We don't know really how the donors are going to want to to distribute their donations either, whether it's going to be over a period of time or whether they're also going to require that prepayment be made. And then we get the same kind of a thing from some of the large donors that may come in where they ask that we prepay that and then ask for reimbursement too, because that could happen. We don't know yet how that all works, to be honest. So the thing we want to avoid is having to go out and do a revolving credit line that we have to pay interest on. If we could maintain cash balances, and if we can draw on the city's funding through that process so that we can maintain some cash flow without having to borrow money and pay extra interest at the time. Totally understand your concern. I would totally not, and I believe the board will agree with me on this. We've had discussions about it. We would not spend all the city's money first and then then we'll spend other donations. But there may be some donors out there that will say, we want to be the last dollar too. And it could be some of the large donors that possibly may come in and say, we're happy to do this, but we want to be in the last 25% of whatever comes. So we don't know yet what that is. And I just want to avoid having to go borrow money on a credit line that we have to pay interest on top of.
So maybe if you get a donor that's larger than our donation, you come back to us and tell us.
Yeah,
and we can adjust it. But right now we're in for $1.4 million in cash plus another 100,000 to Mr.
Right.
Oh, gee whiz, you just walked in, Mark, and then I can't remember. Mr.
Wilson.
So if you get a donor that wants to come up with more than $1.5 million, maybe we can adjust it then.
But do you understand? Yeah. Do you understand my concern though there too as well?
We do, and we're not going to withhold something that's going to jeopardize the project.
Right.
But I also think the biggest risk is the project doesn't get finished if all our money goes in and then donors fall out or don't materialize.
Is the verbiage of all cash being spent first, is that too
Well, all cash
restrictive?
donations, not all of your cash, but the cash donations that are pledged, they need to go into the project before the taxpayer money
And
is the way that's worded.
okay,
Talking about gift in kinds, or you just cash?
No, just
No,
cash.
just cash.
Dallin Staley, and
Yeah.
I was just as the back and forth. I was just wondering. So the big concern is just that the cash is there, right? That we have enough to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So money in the bank would essentially be guaranteed money, whether it was already spent or whether it was in the bank. It would be ours. So I wonder if that could potentially just be rewritten, that we have to prove that the money's in the bank, and that could just help us with the cash flow that we're kind of talking about. I think it would resolve that concern, because there's no way that donor is falling out once the cash is in our bank account. Could that be a good middle ground there to help with our cash flow?
Well, cash can go anywhere. You can show it in your bank account today, and then tomorrow it goes somewhere else. And I'm not saying you deceived the city or whatever, but it's in the account today, could be gone tomorrow, and that doesn't ensure that it will go to the project. So
yeah,
condition on us even putting that 1.4 into escrow is that we can show you have. There's a condition on us putting that 1.4 in escrow that says State of the Rec Management needs to be able to show they have all the in-kind contributions and document those and have the folks that are going to do them sign off, and then show that you have the cash that's going to make up from in-kind to completion on hand, or show all that, and then we'll put the money in escrow. So now we're talking about getting that money back out of escrow on the last money out.
Okay. Yeah. So that's where, I feel like we could be secure. I don't feel like there should be so much mistrust to think that we would.
it's not mistrust. That's just a standard way of handling
okay.
it. It's standard business practice. So it's not a mistrust. It's not accusing you guys that you're going to do anything wrong or whatever. It's just
Well, I think
standard
there is
business.
a difference. There is a difference when John Doe pledges $50,000 out of his or her goodwill, and then you get a $250,000 letter of pledge from, let's just say, the Larry H. Miller Company, for example. there's a certain amount of credibility, but they say we'll pay it, but we're going to pay it over 2 years. We're going to give you 125,000 now and 125,000 next year.
Yeah.
There's a more level of assurance and comfortability, I think, from something like that than somebody that just has a strong interest and wants to be good and with his 50,000, but then
Yeah.
something happens and he or she can't follow up on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I hope you don't mind me asking. I'm just trying to understand. So I appreciate the back and forth.
Not at all.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So, and I guess Scott, I'm just looking at it different that John Doe actually gave us the 50,000. We deposited it.
Then you're all
in our
good.
account.
Then you're all good.
So
You're all good.
I want to make one more point. And in just reading more carefully this line, this might clear it all up.
State your name.
In David Staley, in 9A on page 6, proof that all cash donations pledged and received by Staley. So this wouldn't necessarily just be pledged cash; it would be cash that had been pledged but also received.
Right.
So if we had pledged cash, and maybe this will clear it, if we had pledged cash that we had not yet received because they wanted to come in at a certain calendar date or whatever, once the plans are made and the pledges are made, but we had spent all the other cash, but a pledge was yet coming, that wouldn't be held against the use of the escrow fund then, as that reads, as I read it. Pledged and received, it requires 2 conditions be met there. So if it's pledged but not received, and there needs to be a cash draw on the account, but that pledge is going to be committed for a certain time or something, because that could happen. I could see that possibly happening. So as I see the legal language there, that does require 2 conditions be met. Is that correct?
That's not the intention of the line. So I don't know if we need to.
Then the language needs to be
Then it
changed.
needs to be changed, because the intention is the cash donations have come in, they've been pledged and received and put into the project before the taxpayer money goes into it.
So we could see a potential roadblock if another donor came in and said, we want to be the last, let's say Eccles or somebody said, we want to be the last money, but it's here ready to go when you're ready. We could run into a hang up there.
We will not unreasonably withhold any kind of changes like that to make the project happen. Just like Mr. Bittman said, if there's another large donor in there that wants that same condition, we can work with it. And if it's the Eccles or the Larry H. Miller or something that we know is a reasonable, assurance that it's going to come through and the timing, then it's not going to be withheld, but we need the chance to review that.
No, and I'm fine with that. That was my concern, that we run into a situation where there may be timeliness issues of how others are bringing in at a certain point on the construction phases and stuff. So you guys are willing to look at that.
Construction and whatnot. So we're not going to unreasonably withhold.
I think that's reasonable. Do we need to write it any different then to indicate that, or or do we need to revisit it at the time, or is it going to be malleable at the time that this situation may arise? Without
I'd
changing
defer
the
to the
agreement.
attorney for that.
So if something like that comes up, we're going to bring it back to the public body. We're going to bring it back to this setting with the council to do that work. Staff won't just be able to make that change on the fly. So just be aware it's going to take a little bit of time to get that through.
But I see a willingness to work through
Absolutely.
these kinds of
Oh, yeah.
situations.
Absolutely.
Okay. That was my big concern with Alan, because I'm going, what if we have $5 left in our account and then we need a $100,000 payment and everything else has been done. And, you get into little tic-tac things. We just don't want to do that to where it becomes a burden to meet our
We just don't want
obligations
that
of
money
that, especially.
being first into the project,
Right.
that, and then we wonder, is this other rest of this money coming together to finish it?
And then the other little concern again I had that I will bring back up again is on the cash flow basis. If we are running into zero balances because we are spending it all the way down before we do go to the city, you do understand, it will require that we get a credit line. We will have to get a credit line at that point. If we've spent all the private donations out, it will require that we get a credit line and pay interest on that money to finish what the city will be donating, because we'll be running 30 days behind.
Well, it could only be a day. If you borrow on your credit line and then put your reimbursement into the city and we refund that back back to you. I mean, it's not going to.
Is there going to be
Yeah,
a
well-
review process that will take time there, or is that going to be fairly open to do something like that? Because that will happen.
When you submit a draw, we'll call it a draw request, you would submit your information that says, yeah, this was spent on the ice rink, and here's the invoice, here's the check, et cetera, et cetera. Staff would review it. We would do an invoice. It would go through our accounts payable process. So you can anticipate at a minimum of 2 weeks.
That's true.
We always put in our contracts when we deal with folks that we're not going to be bound until 30 days because stuff happens sometimes.
Right.
But that's what it would be. It would be probably 2 weeks, most likely be 2 weeks before that check gets turned around, maybe up to 30 days.
Okay, I'll ask one more question then with that. Could we consider a change in the provision that requires us to prepay all expenses and then seek reimbursement, that if we have spent all of our cash donations and the balance is the city's money that will be utilized, that we wouldn't have to pay it first, but we could seek direct payment by submitting invoices rather than paying it first by drawing a credit line, because we are going to be into it at least 2 weeks, it looks like, which could amount to quite a bit of money at some points for interest and such. So is there a way that we could look at doing something like that where we prove that the work was done, the invoices are sent in to you for money, the money is transferred into our account and we pay the bill? So that's the other point that I would just like to bring up as a little detail point. So I don't know if there's any room on that, but that would be another consideration to help through the cash flow issues that will arise.
Both the provision of reimbursement and the provision of last money out are kind of getting towards the same thing, that we don't want to be putting our money out there before we know the building's going to be done. The reimbursement part is very attractive to the city. It gets all the documentation in place, so when auditors come around later, we can show a nice clean paper trail that says, here, look, they brought us in. We had the right documentation before we paid out. I see what you're saying about if we're definitely the last money in, we would still need the documentation.
Well, there would be controls in place, so the documentation would be there. We do the same thing in our business. We document everything through with a lot of internal controls before we pay any bill. And that would have to be treated the same way if that provision was opened up just a little bit on that last dollar stuff, which I would think would satisfy the need for documentation of the actual expenditure that's being proposed.
Dave,
But again, I'm just asking that.
most
If-
contractors, are used to waiting 60 to 90 days to get paid.
I know that.
Does that help?
No, it doesn't. Well, it helps to know that that's true.
I'm
but
just saying that's reality in our world.
I know, but in the provisions of the agreement as it stands currently,
You can submit the bill, and if they don't get paid for another 2 weeks, it's not a.
no.
It's okay.
But they
No,
didn't
that's not what
submit
I'm
the bill
talking
until
about.
It's a reimbursement, so they would have already had to send the check.
So the provisions in the agreement right now are that we have to pay the bill first and then seek reimbursement. So I'm just wondering if we're going to the last dollar issue, if that can be loosened up, since we are using last dollar,
I'd
where
probably
we don't
rather
have to
leave
do
it-
a credit line.
My preference would be to leave it the way it is and work through issues as we come to them. If it looks like we're heading down that road, bring it to council and discuss it then.
Oh.
Then everything, we know more details, we know who's funding, we know where the money's coming from and whatnot. Right now, it's so nebulous as to how this is all going to come together. I would rather leave it as is and work through that later myself.
And so you'd be willing, though, at that time, if we come back and say, hey, things are on track, we're on budget, we're going to make this thing finish.
Absolutely.
Could we consider then changing to a pay the bill system instead of a reimbursement system?
Right.
You'd be
Then-
open to that?
Yeah, then we know the details and we know how the funding is coming in and
Okay,
whatnot.
so we're on record with that here then. So we're
Well, it's
good.
not a
I mean, it's not in
commitment,
the
but we'll
agreement, but
do
it is
it,
on record that
but
the
we will
willingness to
consider
discuss
that,
it.
yes.
Okay, that helps me a lot because I did have some concerns with that of just, again, more interest,
Right.
more expense, more other things coming down on us that, again, just make it more difficult. So I don't think, and again, as we look at issues that may arise with a foundation saying we really do have to be the last dollar, the city will reconsider those kind of things in the agreement then at that point in time, right?
Well, I want you to also know, just because this is not out of the ordinary. In fact, when the Shakespeare project was being built, we had lots of pledges and lots of donors coming in, and we actually had to take a loan out with Terry
right,
to pay the costs until those pledges were recouped.
Right.
And we paid down, and we finally got it paid down, and there was a cost associated with that, but that's what we had to do to keep the project moving forward.
And I totally agree with that. The thing that I think we'd want to avoid is just paying unnecessary interest.
Sure.
If the track was looking good,
Absolutely.
and your money was the last dollars to come through, that we maybe not have to do that if the money is there and everything's on track. So as long as we can keep that open dialogue at that point in time,
correct.
I'm more comfortable with that, and I'll seek that approval from the board as well. So, okay, does that make sense? Okay.
I have another question off that topic. So back to the non-compete. Let's just say that you guys get going. Let's just say in your summer programming you start pickleball, and it's very successful. But then later on, the city builds a MAC center, and they want to offer pickleball. How does that? Is that one of those things where you guys sit down and work it out? Because it says you can't run concurrent programs. So how does that?
I want to say one thing before Dallin comes up, because I know he wants to talk about this. I personally, and we haven't really discussed this in depth as a board yet. Dallin and I have discussed it. I think the second part of the non-compete thing that you did add there is unenforceable for one thing, because it says, or we will just get together and do a good faith effort. So it's
either or.
Yeah, it can be one or the other. So the one is acting in good faith. It's like a resolution. We will commit to meet together to do something, but even if we don't agree, we're going to move forward with what we want to do individually. So the first part of it that was part of the original agreement was and so if we can agree that that is a resolution type statement in there, it's not binding because it doesn't look binding the way it's written, that part. But the first part, we want to, okay, let's just take an example. Dallin, I want to speak to this.
Real quick.
Okay, which page are we even on there?
That's an or.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
So
it's Article 1,
or the bottom,
18.
not both.
Right, that's right.
You're on
So
page
if you
17.
if you defer to the or, we would love to have just the second paragraph in there to say we will sit down with the city and the rec people, and we'll do our best to mesh these programs so that it serves the community to the best it can. We would prefer not to have a problem just arise because, say, we're running a day camp and we can roll some basketball standards out onto the court, or we could roll pickleball nets out, or however those things might work. And it's part of a larger offering that we may be doing. In the winter, we're not going to see these kind of conflicts because we're going to have ice, and it's going to be ice in, infrastructure, ice sports going on. It'll be during those other times of year where we may want to develop a more complete program for, let's say, kids that are out of school that want to come there and do things. And we would really not want the city to be able to come down and say, you can't roll a basketball standard out, or you can't roll a pickleball net out, or you can't do this or that, even though it fits within the structure of our business model, because we're really not going to be there to compete with the city on any of that, but it might really limit in some cases. And that's, again, legal agreements are legal agreements because things can come up. They address the worst case scenario things generally, legal agreements do. So we would hate to have a situation where we're rounding out a daytime program that somebody said, somebody from the rec department comes and says, they're playing basketball over there or something like that. We don't want to see that happen because we want to be able to do a good offering. We want to succeed, for one thing. We want to stay financially sound. And if by adding certain things into a curriculum of activity within our structure, it might be the same thing at the same time that the city's doing somewhere else, but the kids aren't going to leave that day camp to go over to a ball field or to go over to a basketball place or whatever. We'd actually like to see a really cooperative effort in that whole dry season anyway, that we we'd like to utilize the facilities there and actually help bolster each other's business in those kind of situations with the lake, the fields, and the aquatic center.
So would we.
We do.
And it may be that if we do basketball, we might want to say, city, are you going to offer this at this time when we could come use your gyms, or can we just put it in our own facilities? Do you see what I'm saying? So we might get down to nitpicky little things that we would hate to have become little burrs under the saddle.
Right.
In the
My suggestion was just exactly what you said. It's a non-binding statement, and it adds burden to you guys to meet, for the city to schedule and meet and whatnot. And what does it really accomplish?
Right.
So I suggested that we take that out and go with the first one and just add the couple of words that we won't run programs simultaneously. We're not going to compete with you. You're not going to compete with us, and work together. This is a joint project. We don't want you to fail. You guys don't want us to fail.
Right.
And I just think the first statement is complete and simple enough that it's just like, we don't want to compete with each other. We want everybody to be successful. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay.
Councilman Hartley is a real black and white, and I love that banker in her, because I think it's difficult for us to say on this lease, because it's 22 years and then it's renewable. There could be 70,000 people in this valley, and we might need both of these things running.
Well,
we might need basketball there and basketball over here.
You might host a 3-on-3 and you need both facilities.
Yeah. So
Right, 3-on-3 basketball tournament and you need both. Maybe
so we
so
need
the
to be
schools have-
flexible enough.
To clamp it down.
So and I know Ken addressed this last week too, that they're not planning to do those kinds of things. I guess my problem with the first one, I would ask that we go with the second one, because it describes what we're all describing, right? We get together, we work together to coordinate our programming, and we try to raise all ships, mutually. I don't know. I should flip to it in that one, but
could I ask a legal question? Could we do something, because could this be an exhibit, or could this be an amendment? I don't know how this works with the signed lease, but it is the intent that this kind of thing happen, but it's not part of the signed lease agreement.
Then why state it?
Good point.
From my
No, you're a good
perspective,
point.
it's not binding, so
yeah, and here's
And I'm quickly becoming concerned about creating a meeting for all of us every.
Well, and it's just a meeting for
And
me
I don't
and
think
Ken,
it's. I don't think the potential competition would come in at all for many, many months.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how I see it, and I just don't want to commit Ken and his staff, nor you and your staff, to a meeting that regularly. I think we need to do it as needed. And I think the first wording
we can agree to that too.
really essentially covers
So,
that, right?
Here's my question about the first one, I guess. Who can someone tell the other that they just can't do it?
yeah, the leaseor.
So the city can tell us we cannot do something. And that, I guess that's where my concern comes in. I would have a very hard time agreeing to the city being able to say, sorry, but not sorry, you can't do it.
But down,
And I know that's not,
yeah, in the real world, I mean, we're dealing with government, but in the real world, when would a leaseor give that power to the leasee?
I'm not asking that we get that power either. I'm asking that neither has the power to say sorry, but not sorry. And because I think the way
going to the leasee then. If the leaseor doesn't have the power to say no, then that power is going to the leasee. I'm just telling you, in the real world, that's not how these things work. That's why I wrote it that way.
we wouldn't have the power to tell the city not to do it.
Correct. Yeah, you're leasing with the city.
Yeah, we don't want the power to
You would
tell
have the power to do whatever you wanted
We-
on our property and compete.
which
with
is
taxpayers.
what we need. And it goes back to needs. That is a real need that we have. And I know that we can sit here in this room, the five of you and us and Ken, and I could confidently say that we can all work together. This is a 20-year lease, so probably none of us in this room are going to be here towards the later part of this lease, and politics are politics, and they are what they are, and we don't know we don't know who's going to want to do what. And I think that's a pretty risky thing for us, that regardless of what we have going, the success that we have with any program, it just takes the city to say sorry, but not sorry. And if you say that's not the intent of the city to do, then why is it in here? Why is the power granted? I have a real problem with that. And I feel like this is a real need for us.
Our attorney has advised us to have that clause in there. I feel a need for us to have that in there. The taxpayers are putting a significant amount of money in there. He's representing the taxpayer, and
if we don't foresee an issue with it, if it is the intention of this body to work together and to make everything work,
if a conflict arises, there's got to be some kind of a binding agreement that decides it.
So let's say 15 years from now, we've got a thriving day camp, and city recreation director has a facility that's lightly utilized, and he wants to get his numbers up, and he wants to say, we're taking your day camp. Is that something, if you were us, would you want that looming over you? I mean, that could essentially put us out of business if that's one of our staples.
We don't want to do that, though. So why would we ever want to do that? We don't want to run the ice rink.
I know that you don't, and no one here does. That's not to say that no one ever will. I believe you. You've got to see it from our perspective that's a possibility.
I think we're creating boogeymen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all hypothetical. I just don't see that with the way that we're entering into this agreement. I just don't see that being a problem.
We're not going to be able to write an agreement that poses no risk to you whatsoever.
I
You're
understand.
going to have some risk. The agreement from the landlord's perspective is to mitigate the landlord's risk. That's what we've tried to put forward as something that mitigates the landlord's risk.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically, it's because we have the land and you want to lease our land. So I don't know how much simpler than that I could make it. As a leasee, yes, you were going to have some risk.
You guys have the right to lay down the law, but I guess we'll have to decide if it's something that we can accept. So,
Okay, I want to just come to the same thing again. Dave Staley, sorry. So if, I really don't like we've got the big stick kind of feeling that kind of portrays, because we are also investing a huge amount of energy and other things into getting this done. So I want to come back with a proposal that if we are already running a program and there is a city council run amok, I'm just saying if it happened, can we be given the authority in this agreement to say you cannot do that?
So then that would state to the city that we cannot expand our recreation for the next 30 years if we choose to, and it happens to conflict with what Staley's already doing. My legal advice for the corporation is to not enter an agreement like that.
Okay, so then for us, we take all of the risk. Is that correct? No. Pardon?
On this particular matter.
Then yes, we do, right?
Sure.
On this one item.
Okay. We will have to really consider that. I don't think anyone here would purposely try to do that to us. I honestly don't believe that. I don't believe it's a fair, I don't believe that is an equitable provision in the agreement. I think there should be some standard, or maybe even a third party is brought in to mediate such an action. I don't think that one side should have the power to absolutely say you can't anymore. You can say you wouldn't do it, and we all agree we wouldn't do it. We do have to look at worst case scenarios, though. That's what agreements are about, right?
Right.
So is there a room to bring a third party in to arbitrate or to mediate that kind of a proposal that very likely could come out in the next 20 some odd years?
You mean at that time?
Yeah, if that came up and we were forced to curtail something that we were doing, that we had been doing, say, for 10 years, and the city decided they didn't want the competition and wanted to do something, would it not be more equitable to have a third-party arbitrator or mediator of some sort that could actually make that judgment and that decision?
Yeah, my advice would be not to give up that power. I've never leased property from someone else and been able to finagle a lease so that the landowner didn't have control over final say of the property. That's taxpayer funds. The council should decide how we deal with taxpayer property and funds that should not be delegated to a third party.
So no matter, and I understand your legal counsel there. So no matter what our programs might be, no matter how long they may have run, they could get taken from us without any recourse whatsoever under that advice.
Now, when you say they could be taken from us, we couldn't take programs from you. We might.
Well, we could take the
engage in
idea.
similar
We could,
programs,
yeah.
but we couldn't take. We have no right to take programs.
Well, it basically is. You're going to say, we're going to start this pickleball program and you can't compete with us. That's what it essentially says.
It might, this might be an issue that causes us to walk. I will be honest with you on that, because I don't think with all that we're putting forth into this, again, the board would have to consider that. But if we have an established model that is working, there should be some protection in this agreement that says the city cannot compete with current programs or not take it from us. At least we're happy to compete because
Not to say
we're
you can't do it too.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's a better thing.
The city doing anything they want. We just don't want them to have the right to tell us we can't do something we've been successful doing.
Yeah, we don't want to get in the ice skating business. We don't want to get in. I mean, our recreation is for citizens' use. We're not here to try and compete. In my view, we're not here to try and compete with business. The tricky wicket is you're on city property, and that's where the lease is drawn. I mean, if you were a private business, you could do anything you wanted. And I think that's where it comes down to, and that's what we're trying to protect. But golly, I just think that we're beating a dead horse, and I just think that it's unfortunate that it has to get down to this, but I know it does, and I realize that contracts are very tricky.
Okay, I just want to say one more thing, and then I'll go with Justin. There, again, and I know this has been said before, that we need to have some teamwork here, and at one point, one of you mentioned that it doesn't feel like teamwork. This doesn't feel like teamwork to me, because the fact is that the situation will likely arise where this will happen. And if we are better at doing something than the city is, offering a certain program, we would hope that that would be recognized. Maybe we're more efficient at running whatever we're running on that floor. We're not going to go run a junior jazz program on the floor at the same time you guys are running one. We will not do that. I can tell you that. And we ought to maybe take some consideration of what the current status of the programs are and write that into the agreement that it is very risky. I mean, who knows? There could be a new rec director that comes in, like Dallin said, that says, wow, they are wildly successful with this day camp thing. We have a facility right across the parking lot. We should do that. And that would be, and we're okay if you do it. We just don't want you telling us we can't do it anymore. If you want to do it, I love free enterprise. I love competition. But if we don't see a way of something giving us a return that helps us keep our door open, because you're doing it better than we could do it, then we don't want to do that.
No.
Do you see what I'm saying? So we're going to use some common sense in that, and I assume the city would too. It's just that the provision is extremely one-sided there. It is your property, but we're also, again, if this is not an official public-private partnership, it is certainly an ethical partnership that we are working together, and we need some protection in that arena. We really do. I'm gonna yield.
Justin MacArthur, I just had a question on the potential appeals process? Is there one? Could there be one where, I know we're bringing up boogeymen, but 15 years from now, new rec director comes in and says, nope, you're done. I, as the rec director, say you're done. Would Staley Rec Management at that point have the ability to appeal, to come to the council, to have a public hearing about it? Or is it staff said, no, you're done, that's it, over? What does that process
We're
look
a
like?
political body.
Right.
If you want to come to the council and challenge any of staff's actions on this or any other action that we take, you're more than welcome to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that political appeal that you would have. That's one. Okay. Two, there's a third party adjudicator already built into the contract. If you think the city's breached the contract in some manner, you could file a suit for breach of contract, and that's all spelled out in there that it would be.
Right. Well, this wouldn't be a breach of contract. It would just be a risk that is technically in the contract. I'm just wondering what our recourse would be, but that makes sense. There's the political
levels of recourse. Okay. You have a political recourse to come back to an elected body if you don't like what staff's doing. Okay. People do that all the time. Okay. And you have a legal recourse if we do something that breaches the contract.
Right, which I wouldn't be afraid of because obviously we, as it stands, it wouldn't be breaching. But thank you, that helps.
Yeah, I guess just to reiterate, I don't think the city should have the right to force us to abandon a program that we are running. And
would you like us to table this so you can go back to your board and talk about it? Under the advice of our attorney, I don't know how my counterparts, I don't know if we want to make a motion and see
I'd like to
where
hear
it would
what
go.
other concerns you had. You said you had a few, and I think we've only heard two.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest one of the thing, but yeah, I'll have to sort through here and see if there's more. But I would just like to ask that you guys give some good consideration to what the city stands to gain by it. We would be happy to agree to never touch any program in a season that it's currently being offered. Would be happy to agree to that because we'd never do it. But as far as anything that we develop, I'm pretty sure that we will not want to grant the city the right to just force us to abandon it. I think that is totally unreasonable. So anyway, that is what I would like you to consider. And maybe we could even put in there that if the city has developed it before we develop it, that we will grant the city to.
But we haven't built our gymnasium at this point. We'll have a lot of, not exactly the same, but the same type of activities. So there's no way that we can say we'll never offer anything in our gymnasium that you guys are going to do.
And that's fine. We would never ask that. In
Right.
no way. I want to be 100% clear.
But
In no way.
But if it's competing with our programs that our staff and directors of those programs have got planned for when we put that, we've got to have some kind of ability to control that. We are the lessor on the property, and I understand your concerns, but why are you guys so fearful that we want you to fail?
Well, why are you so fearful that we want you to fail?
We're not. We're just putting standard agreements in there.
Look, when we do programming, we do it with the idea that we're going to generate some revenue. And as you well know, that facility in itself right now takes about $400,000 a year out of our general funds to make it run. So when we do programming, our whole idea is to generate more revenue and lessen that load on the general fund. This is set up to protect our ability to be flexible in our programming. We're not here to make sure that you fail. We're not here to give you $2.85 million and then run you into the dirt. That's just not what we're here for. We've already committed to funding half of your program and leasing you a piece of land for $1. Well, this would propose we lease it to you for $1 a year. So we have a substantial investment in making sure you don't fail. I don't know why it would be in our best interest to come back later and do something to make you fail.
Politics is politics. And as we all know, when you start getting a black eye if something's in the red, you start looking for a way to do it. And if that means you go and take something that we are doing well at and you pirate it over to your place. I just don't think that's right. I don't think that's something that the city should be able to do. In no way would we expect the city to be limited in what they can program in their gym and their income potential. And if we can do it so much better that you can't get people into your gym, should you even be building your gym? And this is a discussion we probably don't need to have, gym versus ice rink, because it comes up every time. We are not trying to be head to head or compete with the ice rink. We're just asking that we be able to have the security that when we develop a program, we can continue to run that to the best of our ability. And if the city comes and outcompetes us and takes our customers, that's the city's right. We would never ask the city not to give up that right, but we are asking for the city to give up the right to pirate what we're doing. And I know you're saying that that's a big, what if, and we're creating monsters. We're not. I know none of you are monsters. I know no one that works in the rec department is a monster. But you just never know. And I don't think that's a right that we want to grant. So I think that's enough said. Please consider it.
I'm comfortable with that myself because
I am too.
I think that if we can't compete on our own merits, then something's wrong with the city.
I agree. And that's all we're asking.
It goes back to, and this may be a poor example, but the county just sold a building, the corner of Fiddler's Canyon Drive and Main Street. And there was some discussion that we should keep it. We should fix it up. We should lease that property and make money. The problem with that is, and this may not be a good example, but the problem with that is government can always be, where they're subsidized by the taxpayer, they can always lower and have an unfair advantage with private. Now, this is a little different because we are leasing it to you and we own the property. So that may not be a great example, and it also goes back to, in this whole discussion, if the city wanted to build an ice rink and run it, I would vote no. Because I don't think they can do it like private can. And so I agree with you. I don't want to limit your abilities. I think it's a fair thing to compete. If the city wants to do a program you're doing, fine. But don't start it and then tell you can't do yours. I agree with that 100%.
That's all we're asking is just don't take from us what we create for ourselves, I guess. Give us a fighting chance.
So I just want to point out, just to clarify, so this is city property. We're paying $1.5 million for an ice skate rink, and we're paying Staley Recreation $67,000 a year to run an ice skate rink. So,
and a multi-purpose recreational facility.
And we're doing a lease at $1 a year that we have appraised that could be $23,000 a year. So
we're not
investment from the city. It's not like we're just.
But do you really think there's going to be a competition problem? I mean, seriously, I mean, I'm just not.
As staff, we're asking, how do we resolve it? I think that's what we can't even work this issue out, and that's really the question for council is, in the event, now we don't intend to run a daycare because the liability, that'd be nuts. We're not touching that. But like I said, if we're running a home and garden show out in the parking lot, and then we're paying this group to lease the property, and they say, why don't you bring the home and garden show indoors during the summer into our facility? So how does staff deal with that? This isn't like a profit loss so much. From my perspective, it's just, how do we resolve the programming? Because it's not a gym. There are no gyms. There's an aquatic center, there's a lake, there's ball fields, there's large parking area. How do we resolve the programming? That's all we're trying to define in this lease. And Tyler has just suggested, and we're already paying the tenant to be on the property. They'll pay us back $1, so it's $67,499 we pay to them to lease the property. But we shouldn't give away our authority to determine what takes place on the entire complex. So we just want to resolve that in this language. We're not trying to.
Would it work for them to say, we will never do this, 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 and this, and identify to them to that level? Would that?
Paul, may I, Dave Staley. See, we don't want that to be the case, that you will never do this, 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 or this. We just don't want you to tell us you cannot continue doing what you're doing. And you know, we can talk about the lease, the money that's donated. We are grateful for that. Dallin made that clear in the beginning. We really are, and we don't want to imply that is, we're not trying to wield a big stick here either. We really are not. We know that it's by the good graces of the council that money was even granted, and the $67,000 a year wasn't operating money. I don't believe that was considered to be the rest of what the original ask was, but that's neither here nor there, really. The thing that, I guess what we're doing here, we're really defining, I want to back up one step. If it was my facility and I was leasing it to an entity for a given period of time, ethically, morally, if I had granted them certain rights within an agreement, I would not take away their right to do certain things. I would consider that ethically and morally wrong. I deal with agreements every day. We do this all the time. And just because it's a city or a government entity that we're doing an agreement with, I don't understand why it has to be so different than what we do mutually with other companies all the time. Just because it's taxpayer money, really honestly should not make a difference as to whether we can continue to operate a program or not. We're bringing to the table an offer to the city also, to the citizens of the city, to put in a lot of effort, a lot of good faith, to bring something here that has never been here before, and to bring a well-rounded program through the off-season so that it can continue to be profitable. So we're both giving a lot. This isn't one-sided on who's giving either. Grateful as we are for it, it isn't one-sided because there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears go into this so far. The spirit of the agreement, I believe this will really define what might happen in the future with similar arrangements. Maybe after we go through all of this, everyone will say, we never want to try that again. Because look at the way that we dragged through a lot of these issues. There is a feeling among citizens of this city, the county, our state, and the country, that government wields a big stick. You know that that's true. And they do in general. But the perception that government wields a big stick is a pretty strong perception too. I think we can get over that. I think we can actually do better than that. And maybe some of the standard things that we would typically write into agreement, we could do more as if it were a private entity dealing with a private entity on this level. That you would consider it unethical enough to come and take away something that someone had developed and was running efficiently. And if we're not running it efficiently, it won't keep going. I believe, we would have to adjust and change. But if we were doing a good job of it, I think the citizenry would consider it to be unethical to come and take something like that away as well.
So why would the city do that then?
Because exactly what you said, Terry, is that we haven't built the gym yet. I mean, you said we can't make that determination.
We're not going to make any kind of determination and give up our rights before we even get to the point where we can build a gym.
But the inference was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the inference is we don't know what we're going to do yet because we haven't built that yet, which implies that that possibility is a high possibility at some point in the future when the gymnasium is finished, and there may be concurrent things that might conflict with each other.
Mr. Staley, do you
Yes.
know what your programming is going to be yet?
We don't know fully what it's going to be, but it will be developed very carefully with a business model that we want to make this stay in the black. But we do not want to have someone come and say, you can't do that anymore because we want to do it now because we have a facility that will work for the same thing. You can say we will never do that. And I don't believe anyone here would ever do that. However, this is all going to change seats are going to change. And I think in the agreement, there needs to be language and protection that protects us from the next round of elected officials or staff who could come in and say, for whatever reason, because they're not going to care near as much as you do about us, our success, unless they just do. But the possibility is that they might not. And then if there's one entity of the two that doesn't require mutual agreement on these competition issues, if one can make that decision because they are the landowner, which I think is honestly immaterial. If you write an agreement, you write an agreement. Whether you're the landowner or not really makes no difference. If the provisions are in the agreement, you honor the agreement. We do this, like I say, all the time with things. So I do think it's unjust. And I know Dallin does, so we could probably take a vote as a board right now. That is a very big sticking point. And it's on principle too, not just on the fact that we think it might or might not happen over the 20 years or however long we're here. It's a principle. It's a principle that says there's always somebody that can pull the rug out from under us with no cause, really. And that could happen.
I just would like to submit to the council that Cedar City Corporation has a very long history, at least 17 years I've worked here, of honoring its commitments. Cedar City Corporation has not, in the transactions that I've observed, tried to be the bad guy or the unethical guy. Cedar City Corporation pays its bills. We have an excellent credit rating. We work well with our corporate partners, our government partners. We work well with our nonprofit partners, whether they be Staley Rec Management or the Lions Club or the Rotary Club, who's been very good to the city over the years. All of these institutions that we work with and depend on every day to make our city move forward are important to the city, and we do not have a track record, or will not, hopefully in the future, have a record of being the unethical bad guy in a situation. That's just not how we operate.
Might I just
consider that while you have your deliberations as well? 'Cause
I would suggest
I don't
that
like to
we
be painted as the guy that's going to be the unethical guy.
Right. I think we're just beating a dead horse. What we need to do, if you've got other concerns, go over it. Let's put it to a vote or table it or move it on.
Okay, I'll
We're
make
going to
one.
argue back and forth about this. We need to just make a decision. We've got other people on the agenda that
Okay.
have business, and we either
That's-
need to table it for later or make a vote.
That's fine. And if you guys vote to have me sit down, that's fine. I'm going to say one more thing though, unless you ask me to sit down as a body. So then I'm going to ask with what Mr. Bittman's just said, why is it in the agreement then?
We've been through that. We've told you why it's in the agreement. We understand you don't agree with it being in the agreement.
This lease has 100+ terms. It's 48 pages. And if you walk away not getting your way on one, I would consider it a lucky day. That's just my opinion.
Well, so I will make another final statement, then I'll sit down and we can go on with other things. It's probably no need to make this statement because I've already said it before, but to take something that someone has developed to make the doors stay open, I will just say finally, for me personally, and we will definitely consider it as a board, it does pose risk. And because it does take activity to keep the doors open, it's not just one little point of an agreement. It's a big part of the scope of the agreement, that we have the right to operate without the fear or the implication. Whatever our intentions might be today, honestly, do not matter. What is written is written. And if there is a right that those things can be just taken from us without cause because someone else wants to do something that they consider would be competitive, we really can't say anything about it. So I think that's wrong. And I do think that will be a huge sticking point. And it is one that, you know, all the other points of the agreement are a moot point if we can't run our programs. It doesn't matter. If we can't run programs freely, nothing else really matters because we have to generate income. That is what we depend on. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
I'd be interested to know, because I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, because we're looking primarily at the off season, the non-winter time. So we currently don't have enough basketball courts. I suspect when we build our center, whenever that will be, I'll bet we won't have enough then. I don't know that, and maybe Ken or others could respond to this. And we have pickleball that we've talked about. There's volleyball. I don't know what else is out there because, you know, I walk the trails, but I'm not the most active guy in the world. I'd like to know, for my head, to understand this, what are the things we're talking about that we're worried about competing with? What are we worried about?
At this point, we don't know any program that the Staleys are doing other than ice hockey, ice rink facilities, and the city doesn't know what it's doing. This is a protection for the corporation moving forward in time. That's all it is. It's to protect us.
But what I'm concerned about is that fear on our side and fear on their side is going to come to an impasse, and that'll be very tragic, I think, if that happens. So we've got to find a way to figure out how to get over those fears, whatever those might be. Can we identify what the 6 things are that we're all afraid of and say, okay, that is a concern because we don't want you competing on basketball. We're fine if you compete on this. I don't know what that is, but I think this is crazy.
Yeah, Dallin Staley. And yeah, as far as programming, we don't know everything we're going to do in the summer. We do know that our facility will be very different than Jim's, but there is certain things that could be done in those different different atmospheres that could be considered as competing. And I'll echo the same thing you're saying. I don't see that we are going to pose a big competition risk to the city. The problem with what the city is writing in here is there is no limit whatsoever on what they can consider competing with them and tell us to stop doing. There's no limit on that.
I think there is. Mrs. Hartley posed an amendment that said we won't run concurrent programs at the same time. That's a limit.
Okay, but
that's in there.
That is a lot better because that doesn't mean that pickleball couldn't happen and pickleball couldn't happen, but maybe it doesn't happen concurrently, but maybe it needs to happen concurrently.
It needs to. That's,
it caters to 2 different people.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah, because people like outdoors, people like indoors, like different age groups. I just don't foresee it being an issue. And with the way our population, everything that we have in Cedar is usually overcrowded. So I just don't foresee that it's going to be an issue. But our attorney is recommending that we protect the corporation and the taxpayer by putting that in there.
So I want to understand. It says a non-compete clause, and I'd have to go back and read the whole thing.
So what it currently says, during the term of this lease and any extension thereof, Staley agrees not to compete with city by running programs simultaneously that the city is offering. City agrees not to compete with Staley by purchasing, constructing, and operating an ice rink. If city determines that it is in the city's best interest to enter the ice rink business, city will consider purchasing Staley's equipment. Any purchase of Staley's equipment is at the sole discretion of city.
It doesn't say in there that we could run over tomorrow and say you have to stop doing XYZ.
But it actually does. If the city says maybe not tomorrow because maybe you wouldn't have the facilities and we won't either. But if we are doing pickleball and the city says we want to do it too, and at the same time, it doesn't mean the city has to tell us not to do it, but the city has the right to say you can't do it.
That's how it's
right?
written.
That's
The
correct.
city has the right to say you can't do it. Our programming is the only thing we
I
have.
don't know why we'd want to do that.
I don't know either. So why do you want the right to do it?
I don't know.
I mean, I think we're all on the same page that we will work together and that it's not something that we want to do. So why does the city have to retain that right and hold that burden over our head? I don't think that the city needs to do that.
Do you have other things in the contract that you're not?
I
Happy
think
with?
that was the big one. So this is the one we need to consider. I guess you can vote, you can table it. We can talk more over the week, but
Dave Staley, and I'm sorry, again, you can tell me to quit if you want. The issue is not that in the agreement, it says that Staley will not compete on anything the city is doing, but it doesn't say the city at the same season, basically, right? During that same season,
The same
right?
programs at the same
Okay,
time.
same question. But it doesn't say that the city can't start doing that and then tell us to stop. So the language is way too broad and it leaves too many doors open to risk. And if you're not worried about the risk, and if you're saying it shouldn't ever be an issue, then why in the world is it in there? Because that really is, I mean, Tyler, you've said that it is a small thing, and if it comes apart because of this one little thing, then count it as a blessing or whatever.
Never said it was small.
Okay.
I said it was just one term.
Okay, one term.
The reason why it's in there, from my opinion,
Yeah.
is to protect the city. So if there is a conflict, we know how to resolve it. Instead of going to court and litigating, the lease is clear.
Right.
It's to protect both parties so we understand exactly the road we're headed down. Do I see this first coming up? No, not why I'm with the city. But if it does, that's what I get paid to do.
Right.
So that in 20 years from now, they're not saying, well, what was that city attorney thinking? These guys are running us out of the aquatic center business, right? Why would we have done this? We're giving them this property for $1 a year and they're running us out of our programming. I'm not going to give advice to do something different than that. If the council chooses to, that's fine. I'll write it exactly how they want.
Okay.
But it's to protect the city.
Okay. But it does leave no protection for Stately Rec.
It leaves the risk on you as the leasing.
Absolute risk, all risk.
But there's ways to mitigate that risk. And I think Tyler just outlined some of them by cooperating and not fighting over every little thing.
Is there
Ways to mitigate the risk.
But there's no guarantee. I mean,
there's no guarantee.
It's like in Moab where I grew up. There was an old machinist. He was an amazing individual, one of the most giving people I knew. And in his office, I think I've said this before, but in his office there was a sign that said, "In God we trust. Everybody else pays cash."
Dallin Staley again, but Cedar Hoops runs youth basketball. Cedar City runs youth basketball, and there's no litigation. They don't have to go to court over it. They just both do what they need to do. So I don't think that we're going to need to go to court if we're doing pickleball and the city's doing pickleball. We just get along. I think it's that simple.
Right. But with Cedar Hoops, we don't lease them property. We have no control over how they use their gyms. So
I would like to make a motion that we
Hold on a
approve.
minute.
What?
We're still in the middle of a public hearing.
Oh, I thought the public hearing was last week. I didn't
No,
think
I
we
opened
had.
the public
Oh,
hearing.
okay.
Yeah.
I
Got
apologize.
to reconsider because the terms are changed. Is there
Okay,
anybody
gotcha.
else that wants to address? Okay, Mark.
Mark Wilson, I'm the architect on the project, and I'm not going to pretend to be an attorney because I'm certainly not one. I'm just a stupid architect, but I have some experience that might just shed a little light on some of your concerns. I'm not going to take sides on this one way or the other because there are valid arguments, and I do believe that there's language that could solve this. If you could just agree upon that and find it, I do believe that that's there. But the thing that I wanted to say is that in my experience, when I've designed and we have built 6 different recreation centers in different communities. And there's always fear that they're going to be a competition to the private enterprise that is in the community. And it's been my experience that that's never the case. That if there's a Gold's Gym in town and a gym opens and your recreational gym opens, that they both coexist because they're not in competition with each other. They have a different clientele, they serve a different group, they have a different purpose. And I see that that's the case here too. So I think your need for protection and from the city and the fears of Staley Rec are all valid, but the reality is that there won't be a competition between the private sector, which would be Staley Rec, and the Cedar City Recreation Center, because they will have different missions and will be serving different people and will be charging different fees. And some will be there at Staley Rec to be in a competition league that they can't get at the community center. And that's just the way this thing all sorts itself out over time. Those that are in private practice or private facility are going to do the things that they need to do in order to make the money to stay alive. And so they'll provide the programs that bring that cash in. And the difference between that and the city is that you're serving the community and you're going to provide the programs that are going to serve your citizens at a reasonable price, and they just don't compete with each other. That's my experience over the years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Tyler Melling. I just have a quick suggestion. I won't pretend to be an attorney either here, right? No, I think Tyler's much more versed in this kind of contract law, but I would propose maybe some type of protection against unreasonableness and the winds of change in politics going forward over the next 20 years. And I don't know if Staley's would agree with something like this, but there are the issues with binding future councils. But if there was some provision that required, let's say if there was a program that that the tenants wanted to were asked to discontinue, that would require a 4-to-1 or 80% of the council to ratify that discontinuance. Is there any flexibility there so that it would be very clear that Staley's were being the unreasonable ones in that type of a situation if they were being asked to discontinue the program? And I don't know if that's an option.
If the council wanted to say that any conflicting programs would have to come for city council vote to discontinue Staley's program, that could be written in.
Okay, that's all.
I think that could work.
But it still retains the city's ability to control it, which is their
Yeah.
basic argument that they don't like.
Yeah, but at least it comes back to the public. It isn't just staff driven or something like
I
that.
think it's going to come back to the public if we go and tell them, you have to stop doing X. I'm pretty sure they're going to be right back in front of this body.
And a wildly successful program that people in the community are using, I don't know, politically, it would be political suicide maybe for, right.
I just don't know why we want to do that.
Dallin Staley again, but I know there's plenty of basketball players that would love to play basketball for cheaper at the city gym. So, I mean,
but we don't have them yet.
Well, I'm just saying you wouldn't create community outcry by offering the same programs cheaper and then telling Cedar Hoops not to do it as long as the community just wants the programs. So we really want the protection for ourselves just to not be told no. Again, we've never asked the city not to do it, but I just think that's a very reasonable middle ground.
All right. Let's close the public hearing. And now, Terry, if you had, so I cut you off if you want to.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'd make a motion that we approve the contract as the one that was delivered today, the final one, as outlined by Tyler, eliminating the or provision and leaving the original non-compete clause in there.
I have a question on that motion. Does that include that your language about where they were talking about, I forget exactly how it was worded, but it was that they wouldn't happen.
Come back to for city council approval.
Well, and
if
it
there is a
did,
conflict.
and that
Should some request.
and that some of the programming can happen, but it's not happening simultaneously or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I forget exactly how that was worded.
So we don't run concurrent programs.
Running programs simultaneously that the city is offering.
Right.
So are you?
Yeah,
okay with an
that's
amendment?
what I'm proposing. That's in the most recent agreement.
But are you including that amended wording for a remedy, having to come back
Before the council.
this council? If we say,
I'm not opposed to that. I feel like Mr. Bittman says it would be back before this body anyway if the city tried to do anything, but I'm not opposed to adding that language.
Tyler?
That's fine. I can add that.
I'm pretty sure it'd end up back here. The only request I'd make of the council is don't make it a supermajority. Don't make it a 4-to-1 requirement.
Yeah, just that it comes back.
Everything we do is the majority
Get a
will of
majority.
the council.
Right.
And if somebody can't get a supermajority versus, it's one vote, right?
with those changes, I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Nay.
opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on to, the next item will be item 22. Consider an ordinance amending the city's trail master plan by extending a trail from 100 west to 300 west along the railroad. Okay, Kit, are you going to address that?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, go ahead, and then
So
one citizen wants to make a comment.
we were, it's not been very long ago that we went ahead and bought the railroad tracks through the city, and we extended our trail system from 300 west basically to Airport Road. This proposal is to extend that trail system further east to 100 west and make the trail system go from 100 west to Airport or said. I think we are going to Lund Highway actually. So that's the proposal here. We have had discussions with Southwest Plumbing. They have some interest in the railroad right of way that we purchased through there, but we haven't made any promises on that. So for right now, we're just asking to extend that trail from 100 west to Airport Road.
Would it just dead end right there at 100 west, or would it go to Maine, or what?
Well, we haven't designed it yet.
Okay.
We don't know. We just want to put it on the master plan so we can design what that whole right of way looks like. And Kit's been tasked with that. I even asked him to maybe put some curves in it and make sure it's not all squares.
Yeah.
Which is hard for engineers sometimes to use an arc and a curve. But
Makes it a little more interesting.
We'll try to put some aesthetics in it, which is not a very good word for me.
Yeah, and the Trails Committee met yesterday, and this was on as part of the agenda. And they would like to see it. They would like to see it get to, all the way to Main Street, which would open up, but right now there's going to be that block we'd have to work out with ownership. Okay. Garth is here and Garth Green would like to address this.
My name's Garth Green. I was the founder
30 years ago of Southwest Plumbing Supply, and we worked down there. I actually own the property on both sides of the tracks, and have owned that for 25 years. I've applied numerous times to the railroad to do something, sell it to me, do something to so that we could clean it up and make something out of it. You talk about taking it to Main Street. You don't own the property going to Main Street. You own the property to First West, and there's nothing I can do about that because the railroad sold it to you, and that's your right to do it wherever you want. But I do own the property on both sides, and so when somebody mentions that would be a great place to make a trailhead with parking and everything, you have to stop for a minute. And I think what you're looking at is a piece of property that I own to make that parking lot and a trailhead out of it. What there is that you bought was 40 feet by 500 feet with the distance from First West to Second West and all the way west to the airport. I started Southwest Plumbing Supply 30 years ago. We've grown very fast. We never have had enough buildings. You're all very well aware. We bought nearly everything down here. We're still just impacted. If you look at us, we're in containers. We're in everything you can imagine to try and run our business. We've grown very, very quickly and fast. We now operate out in Kentucky, a warehouse there, and we have a lot of employees in Kentucky, and we're doing pull, pack, and ship there now. We have inventory there, and so we're close to 300 employees. We're a fairly significant employer in town, I think. I have a plan that I did. I've got a copy if you want to look at it. What my vision for that property was 25 years ago when I did make a plot. I have a plot plan of what I would do with the property I own and what I would do with the property if I owned the railroad piece, and because I own the other side of it too, which is another 40 feet on the other side. I can build about a 7,000 square foot building on the property that I have right to the property line, and have the parking and so forth. If I had the railroad property and the other 35 feet that I already own, I would be able to build a 15,000 square foot building there. That sounds like a lot, but the way we go, 15,000 gets gobbled up in a big hurry. Yeah.
Can you maybe identify with the pointer when you say I own on both sides? Well, I'm just thinking for the audience too.
This is what I have done.
Yeah, I'm not sure when you're saying I own it on both sides of the railroad, I'm not sure.
Is this a pointer? Do you have to have a college degree? Yep. Okay, so I own this building right here. I own this building right here. My son owns, I don't know where, this building here and this building here. I own this piece of property here. This is Main Street. I own this piece here, which is asphalt and fenced. There is a narrow piece that goes right down through here. Oops, wrong one. Right through there. That piece of property I own. We used to, when I ran the plumbing supply house down there, it had pipe in it, pipe along both sides. It worked for me because I could drive my forklift down through and put pipe on both sides. And it was 35, 40 feet wide. Then there was the track area, which is right here. This is what you now own. And then there is a piece of property here, and I'll try and go around it. And you can see it on that plot that I've done. Goes all the way between first and second. It gets quite narrow on this end, and then it expands out right there. Now, if you look at the plats, you can see where that is. What I thought I'd do would be to build on this end of it and get 7,000 square feet. If I had the tracks and my piece on the other side clear over to this building there, I could build 15,000 square feet, meet the green space and the parking.
I never had enough. I don't know how much we're going to expand. I have a very ambitious son. He's in the Philippines right now, and he would have been here. We found out about this thing last night. So we're just, we just scrambled today and said, hey, this is what we do. Your bridge comes across right here on that walking track. You have it on the other side of the road, all the way to Main Street, underneath the thing. It is on Main Street. It comes across there at 300 West. You're going to probably come up here some way and get on this piece of property that goes along the old IFA building. I would suspect that if you want parking and a trailhead, I think you got quite a bit of property with the purchase of the railroad track right here. Oops, excuse me, right here. I think you probably got some more property. That'd be the place where I would put the parking lot for people to come and get on the trail. I can't imagine. I can't imagine a walking trail if I built, and I still can, a huge building right along here, parking lots and fences and so forth. So you have a narrow strip, and what I hate to call it, but I do call it a junkyard right through here, where we seem to put shelving and canoes and you name it, we have over in there.
Call it what it is, Garth.
It's a junkyard. And I rent that to Southwest Plumbing Supply, so I don't have any control. Back to your last guy, when I have 11 tenants who rent from me, and they all expect quiet enjoyment of the property that they have. Of course, they're paying you $1 rent, and they pay a lot more than that to me, but they do expect that they can do what they want to. And so if they want to make that a junkyard, I guess they can. I don't like it personally. But if I built that there, you would have your 40 feet and you could build it. You have every right to build a track, to build your walkway right down through there. They still can't get to Main Street. They can by going across the bridge and coming up the other side. That might be a bit of a walk. However, I think people that are walking that are out for a walk. I've always never understood why people go to a gym in Salt Lake, where my lawyer office is, and they're going to the gym. It's on the 3rd floor, and they ride the elevator to the 3rd floor to go to the gym. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I've said that, and I get some really dumb looks back. It's still none of your business. Anyway, that's where I'm at. We'd like to build a building there. We've always wanted to build a building there. We've done more from the days of, you people have been around a long time, the days of the hide and wool shop down there and to today, and what gets done down there, and the number of employees that are down there, the number of pull packing ships that go out of that area, the number of the businesses that we're developing, which the plumbing is now all over on Main Street, but the Adams stuff, the pretty pictures that hang on the wall is just literally a booming business. You see those out at Walmart out at Deseret Book that says, Mom is great, and it's in wood and it's cute and it's decorated, and you buy them and you pay about $35 for it, and you take it home and hang it on your wall. That came from us. We have that made in China, and we bring in container after container, and that whole thing on 2nd West and 1st West virtually now is all that kind of stuff. And it's unbelievable, the growth and the amount of sales that we're generating, all wholesale, all imported stuff. Anyway, I'll answer any questions. I own the property on both sides of that track. It should be developed. The last thing the city should want is to put their little track, their little walking path right down through there, and then have me just be mad at you and never make anything else out of the Coal Creek Road and my junkyard, and just
So
Just
what are you
go there.
proposing then?
Well, I think it should, I think you ought to just deed it to me and forget it, and I'll build something on it. Where's your economic development people? That was somebody there. That property is valueless to anybody except you and me. You want it
That's
for
why
a
you should pay
walking
for it
path
then if
and-
it's valuable to you.
Huh?
You should pay for it then if
Well,
it's valuable to you.
You know, I mean, that's what my son thinks, but then he's not as ambitious as I am sometimes. So
And we
I
did
can't
pay
help
for
but
it.
ask, but it isn't valuable to anybody. It's 40 feet wide, 500 feet deep. The railroad track piece is not valuable to anybody except me, and I guess to you, and I can't imagine how it's very valuable to you when it doesn't connect to the other trails, and it probably can't because I own the property that you're talking about going across between First West and Main Street is also my property, unless you can convince the guys to let you cut a path through their new building down there that used to be the Parks building, or you can walk along the road, or I guess you can put a sidewalk along my chain link fence and they can walk along that and that'll get them to Main Street. But if they cross the bridge on your sidewalk, they would be right at your walking path. So I don't know that I see that it's very valuable to you either. I think I'm the only one that sees any value in it.
Just for the councils, when we purchased this property, the railroad was very concerned about almost 100 years of industrial use on the property and the unknown nature of what may or may not be deposited on the property after 100 years of rail use. So when we purchased the property, it came to us with a long list of restrictions. And I'd be happy to provide that list to Mr. Green so he can look it over and see if it's still something that is amenable to your plan, because we can only transfer to you what title we purchased. And if it came to us from the railroad with a whole bunch of restrictions, even if we chose to sell it to you, you would take it with those restrictions on the property. So if you're interested, I am more than happy to provide that to you.
Paul, I've bought property from the railroad twice.
Okay.
I am very familiar with buying property from the railroad. You get a quick claim deed, whatever they have, you get, and whatever the problems are with it, they're all yours.
But there's some deed restrictions in our agreements with the railroad that limit what we can do with the property. I'm just offering that to you to maybe you want to take a look at that.
If you can't do it, then you can't do it. But if you're saying, would I accept the same deed you got? Sure.
No, I just want you to take a look at the restrictions.
You can,
So
like I say, I doubt
look
it's.
at them and say, oh, that works, or oh, it
Well,
doesn't work.
And if it doesn't work, then then I'll just say no, and you've got a great walking path. Unfortunately, it probably may not be developed. You can have those. I don't care, but you guys don't do with paper anymore. You do with stuff on computers and screens, and
can
I'm
print
not
it
very
out.
good.
I'll print it out for you.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, sure. If I was gonna buy the property from you, I would expect to have a reasonable price for a piece of property that I'm the only one interested in, and I would want to see the paperwork. Of course I would. And I would take some risks. And the problem is that I'm going to probably have to have some quiet title actions, because if I'm going to build a 15,000 square foot building on that property, I'm going to probably have to borrow some money. And as soon as I do, I got to be able to give a trust deed to the bank, and they're even more unreasonable than the Cedar City Council. That's a joke.
Okay.
So I would have to clear that. I would have to do a quiet title action to quiet any places where it doesn't match, where it doesn't join. But I'm not bothered about that, because I would have to contact the neighbors around me and make sure that there's no objections, and I own both sides of it. So if there's any descriptions that don't close, I mean, all those things, somebody has to deal with that someday, and otherwise, you got lawsuits. We don't need those.
Whether it's the Greens or or anybody that owns that provides that much economic benefit to our city, and that property could be developed and put on the tax rolls versus a weed patch and a junkyard. I think
It's on the tax rolls.
Right.
Mine
But,
is.
but it would be
Yours
more,
isn't.
it'd be,
Yours
if you
isn't.
had a building to it, it's going to.
Yeah, it would, I pay a lot of property taxes.
I know that, Garth. I'm just saying, if you put a building on it, it's going to bring more.
Yeah. So should we look at tabling this and give Garth time to?
So,
get
yeah,
with
so
Paul?
Mr. Green, if you get the documents from Mr. Bittman and you decide you would like to pursue trying to purchase this property from the city, you let Mr. Bittman or myself know. We'll get it on the agenda. The first step would be the city council voting to approve the beginning process of the sale. Ordinance says that you'd need to go out and get appraisals. Once we get the appraisals done, then we open it up to public bid, bring it back to the city council.
Garth, I'm curious, if you had the opportunity to purchase this, then would you build on it rather than sit on it? I don't want to just
If I buy it, I own it.
I know.
If
but
you decide to sell it to, you gamble. I
No.
guess you don't know for sure. I have no plan. I had a plan 25 years ago when I bought the other properties. I would have liked to, but Scott, we've built, we've expanded. We're in Kentucky.
I know, and you're in containers, but
And
if
we're
you
in
had
containers and we're all over Main Street. We have nearly a block. Mike
Mhm.
purchased another piece and pretty soon we'll have that whole block on Main Street and we've got lots of it there. You know, yeah. Do we have enough now? Thank goodness we have enough now. Paul, you're going to slow Mike down? Because I can't.
He's a lot younger than me. And you.
And if you own that, would it be there? Yeah, I have vision. I own property in an industrial part in Provo. You probably recognize if you go up the road and the big building on the left side going up I-15 that has the missionary mall over the top of the thing. Any of you seen it? I own that building. And I look at what's being built around there. It's different than what I would have envisioned years ago, but it's all warehouse space. I've got some office space vacant in my building and I can't hardly even get anybody to talk to me about it. But if I had warehouse space, I'd rent it. That's a perfect location for some rental space. Would the Southwest Plumbing build it and rent it from me? Maybe. Would somebody else like to have industrial space that close to Main Street with a nice garage and some office and a big warehouse? Sure. I mean, that's what they're doing in Utah County. I'm not sure that wouldn't be better. Maybe we're better off in Kentucky and I should do a tilt up or a block building and do a nice job down there. I've been trying to do a nice job in North Cedar City's main area forever. And you guys have done a beautiful job with your road and your curb and gutter and you fixed the creek and we've all spent a lot of money down there.
Yeah.
And all I could come up with, I started with a 69 Ford pickup truck and a 401k worth $60,000 and a house paid for. And we did 40 million last year and we have between 200 and 300 employees. I don't even know. Mike tells me numbers and I just go, oh my gosh.
Thank you.
I'd be glad to see. I'll give you my card and I'd be glad to see what they've given you. And you can email it to me. And I'll have an appraisal done.
I'll make a motion that we table this until all the options can be explored.
Thank you.
And council, I need to double check. I know we had restrictions from the railroad and then didn't we have some outside funding perhaps from the county in the acquisition? We might need to double check if there's any additional restrictions because
the
of the
county.
funding we received. So we'll follow up with you on
County
that, but there may be a
funded
couple of things.
Okay, well,
we need to
look at
look
everything.
into.
So we need to table it, so I'll second that motion.
If you can, you can.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item 23. Consider an ordinance amending the city's transportation master plan by removing a master plan street parallel to I-15 from 400 North to Kitty Hawk Drive. Any discussion on that, or do we know?
The work meeting? Exactly.
You want to talk about that, or I don't know if there's anything we need to add, but.
I oppose this. Kid, is there any way on that end where we built the animal shelter right in direct line with that plan? Could we turn that road if we ever decided to build it? Could we turn it and make it work down there?
That's why I was wondering if we should table it until we look at the whole master plan.
Yeah,
I hate to give up a
really
north-south
hesitate making
corridor.
a decision like this. Sorry, Terry. I just really hesitate making a decision with our traffic the way it is. I think we need to leave every option open.
Every north-south.
North-south.
Yeah.
Make that motion. Do it.
That's my motion, that we do
Table
not,
it.
whether we table this until we can look at all the options, see how we can make it work on that end, do something creative, even if we have to jog it around, whatever.
And second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I guess I had one question on it. Was there a reason why we decided, I mean, was there some urgency or a request in that we need to consider, or?
Oh, it's just that things along that corridor where that master plan road was, it actually started off from 200 North and went down through this neighborhood, went through this property right here, which has been zoned high density residential, and then continued on to the north and actually went around or through the new animal shelter. So it was just getting more obsolete as things changed down there with the construction of the animal shelter, the rezoning that's been done, and things like that. So,
And you said there was some people, I remember last week in the discussion, looking at doing some industrial or purchasing in there close to the animal shelter, but they weren't needing any access that way. They were going to come back the other way. Enlighten us
the main
on
one
that.
that came through the project review meeting was an industry that was going to go down, come off Airport Road and go along the flood channel and do some industrial development down right in this area. And this road that we're proposing to be abandoned really didn't affect that, whether it was there or not. So because they were planning on running their roads in from Airport Road. So
okay, thanks.
So it's just a master plan. It's not that we own any of that property. We'd have to acquire it, and it'd be a lot of work.
Just a line on a map. That's all it is.
The guys that wanted to do that industrial development down there, it's a line on a map that they don't particularly like, because the property without that line on the map is more marketable, right? But if we want to keep it, we can keep it.
Well, let's just look at it.
Okay.
Step back and look at it.
So let's see. We had a motion.
Yep. We voted. Didn't
Yeah, we voted.
We're all done, right?
We're done.
Okay. All right. It's been a while here.
Yeah.
Well, I was telling Scott, if I'll bet if we make this action be as long as the work, it's a record.
It's getting there. Okay. Item number 24.
4 hours.
Consider an ordinance amending the definition of a site obscuring fence.
Okay, basically what we're doing here is we're recommending 3 types of fences that would satisfy our definition of a site obscuring fence. And these 3 fences would all be at least 6 feet high. The first one's going to be the standard block wall, cement block wall that would be 6 feet high. The other one is the privacy link, chain link fence that we talked to you about last time, over like the one behind Brad's. There's the fence around the hospital is the privacy link. Those fences have been there for 10 or 20, almost 30 years and in very good condition. And the last fence that we were looking at, we were talking about initially a product called the Fiberon fence. And after looking into it a little bit, I'll just show you this sample. This is a fence that's been more widely used. It's called the Trek fence. It's very similar to the Fiberon.
Trex is
good stuff.
It's incredible stuff.
But,
I love it. I have it in my backyard.
Yeah.
very sturdy fence. And, we would recommend this as being one of those three fences.
Oh, that'd be great.
Kit, when, on a PUD, when the 6-foot wall goes around it, does engineering or the building department, are they involved in that at all, where it's 6 foot and below? Does it have to be engineered, inspected, or anything, or?
No, it's just put in according to manufacturer's recommendations.
And do we inspect it to make sure?
Not real thoroughly. We would just make sure the fence is in place. If it's one of those three fences, it's a fairly durable fence, whether it's a block wall or the privacy link. Like I said, that privacy link's been around a long time, and then same thing for this type of fence. It's been a very, very popular fence for years, and it's carried by Home Depot.
So, yeah, Trex is a good product. Sorry.
Yeah, as long as it's installed correctly. And that's why I wondered if there's any kind of restrictions or inspections or whatever, if somebody puts it in.
It doesn't require a building permit.
Okay. All right.
Especially if it's just 6 feet high. I think there's fences that are higher than that do require a building permit, but these do not.
That's my concern. If you go by 2 years later and it's leaning 30 degrees because the posts weren't cemented in properly, that's my concern. I'd rather just scrap the idea and go back to block. But can we guarantee that they're going to be installed properly so they look good for a long time?
Well, I don't know if we can guarantee anything, but
not even the block.
You know that if they install block, it's going to be installed right.
It's going to be there.
That's my issue.
If they're installed according to manufacturer's recommendation, it's a pretty good guarantee they'll be there.
Do we have any recourse if they're not?
Not really, because there's not a building permit required for any fence less than.
Do you have a lot of clamor from or requests from builders to go to these other systems, the side obscuring chain link or this Trex product? Is there something?
No.
Who initiated this?
Well, it was basically initiated by the staff, because we have requirements for fences in our standards and in the ordinance, but people will go in, just put in chain link fence with just slats, and then a few years later all the slats are blown out, or the fence is not installed right, and there's aesthetic problems with it, and so we want to get and then people come and bring in these other type of fence products that aren't anywhere close to these type of standards. So we're trying to get it standardized that when the ordinance requires you to put a fence in, we want it to be a good fence that's going to last long and look good in the community. So
what kind of started it all is, as you go through the ordinance, there just isn't any uniformity with, like, at some points it says a side obscuring masonry fence. Sometimes it says a side obscuring fence. Sometimes it says a tight board fence.
Now we're fine.
And so that's what initially started this was, hey, let's make sure all this is uniform.
Clean it up.
I think what we've done to clean it up is great. I just think the come back to the question is, have we created another monster if it isn't installed properly, and then we end up and they have a fence leaning like this? It looks great, but it's leaning at 30 degrees.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that.
Yeah. And we haven't seen a lot of those around, but we have seen a lot of fence that have had a lot of deterioration on them just because they're not the quality of fences.
Look at those vinyl fences all over town.
What's the? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious the cost difference between the Trex and the block. Do you have any idea?
Well, I think in the packet it said something like $30 for this per linear foot and 50 for the block or something like that, is something that Don had estimated.
Is more expensive.
That what?
Block wall is more expensive.
I do.
I had a question. Don had sent us up to 820 South to look at an example of a fiber fence. And it's around the PUD that's Carter's. Why does that not have a masonry fence around it, since that's the current ordinance? I was kind of curious.
Well, at the time, we have to look at the ordinance of when that PUD was built. But
did they go to the Board of Adjustments?
That's why I'm wondering, because it's new. It's a brand new PUD, brand new fence. So
Might have, and that's where we get the type board.
yeah. But we went up and looked at that fence, and it's not a very sturdy fence. very flimsy. And yeah, nothing like what we're recommending here.
Let's tighten it up.
And that's all we're trying to do.
And I appreciate what you made the adjustments on the heights of the junkyard and storage thing, at least in the most recent proposal. So
Okay.
I would make a motion that we approve it.
So you're okay to go with the composite?
I am. I don't know what we can do about the installation of it. I mean, that's,
I don't
you
know if we
know,
need to
can,
add
can we require a building
something.
permit?
Well, if you did that, it's going to defeat the.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
think
gonna-
if it's not a certain
Might as
height,
well
I don't
block.
think we do
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. So we're stuck. We're just going to have to assume that they're going to put in according to manufacturer.
I would hope most do. I'll second that motion.
Okay, let me hang on for a minute till Craig gets back here. We got a motion and a second to
approve.
This ordinance change.
So we'll start with Councilwoman Hartley.
Aye.
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 Okay. All right. Item number 25 is consider recycling options. I don't see Ryan, but Paul, do you have an update?
Yeah, Ryan's off today. Basically, we've seen our costs increase for the Benny program. We reasonably think that our costs are going to continue to increase. The cost right now of doing the recycling program versus sending materials to the landfill. The recycling program is way more expensive than on a per ton basis than sending materials to the landfill. There are private options in town. We have not had communications from Recyclops. Ryan's been trying for weeks now, and we have not received communication back. We think Washington County is probably going to raise our rates again in the near future. We've been told that they want to hold rates down for their ratepayers down there. So they might look to raise rates elsewhere to offset some of that cost. I will let you know that it's funny we're talking about this. I received a call last Thursday afternoon from a young lady who wanted us to do a blue can program and make it mandatory all throughout Cedar City. So there's that line of thought out in the community. But when you look on it on a cost basis, it's not making much sense.
I did talk to Recyclops last week, and they told me that they're not hauling the recycling that they pick up here to the landfill, that it is being transported directly to Rocky Mountain up in Springville. So that answered the question for me, and they said they were going to continue on, even though Rocky Mountain is not taking the Washington County waste, it's going south instead. They were going to continue to take all that Recyclops picks up here. So I believe we will still have an option. I don't know if that price is going to be increased because Rocky Mountain keeps raising their prices. So I don't know.
So if the council's disposed to make a motion to discontinue the program, can you please give us a date? Ryan suggested last week.
I'll make a
calendar
motion.
year.
I'll make a motion that we put up signage at every Benny location with information where they can go private, how they can get a hold of them, and that's available. And say by January 1st, this service will be discontinued due to cost increases.
But I would also want to say that we don't close the door on this issue, because I don't want us to say that we'll never revisit this again.
Sure.
Because we need to when it's right.
But as soon as the market is there.
Sure.
then
No, I understand.
There is no market.
Because there is a, excuse me, I'm sorry, there is a portion of our citizenry that is very much of the opinion that Mr. Bittman referred to. So we've got to be sensitive about this.
Sure.
And to say that we are being forced to do this because of price.
But the reality, and I agree with that, but the reality is that third world countries are now producing their own waste and they're not buying it from us. So that's what's killed the market, I think. And so,
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. We can revisit if the market ever comes back.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did we provide a date for you?
January
Yeah.
1st.
So the
January
motion
first.
was,
January
the
1st.
signage is going to read, we're discontinuing the program due to cost increase, January 1, and we'll provide some information on how they can contact the private provider in town.
Is there just one private provider?
As far as I
That
know.
I know
So we
of.
might want to research that, make sure there's not others, so we make sure we refer
Yeah.
them to whoever's in business, right?
Sure.
I move to adjourn this meeting so we can go into closed session.
Carter Wilkie, could I just make one suggestion? I would also put that all over social media as well, so that people understand what's coming up on January 1.
Good point.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, my motion is to adjourn so we can go into our closed session.
Second.
A second. Okay, we need a roll call vote. Councilman Cousins, we'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Who seconded, please? That motion?
Terry did.
Councilman
Yeah.
Hartley.
You know who made it first.
Yeah, that's right.